Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a Thursday midday edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Hello.
How's everybody doing today? Thanks for being here. Thanks for filing in here for our noon show. Got a fun show planned for you today. Doubleheader today for all the cool kids. Film club tonight. We are showing the classic Marx Brothers musical comedy Duck Soup. That's right. Duck Soup will be the film.
We are nothing if
tonight.
not Marxists.
Yes, there you go. Yes, exactly. So that'll be at 8 o'clock tonight, and then we'll take calls afterwards. So it should be a fun day. A day-night doubleheader, as they say. So thanks, everybody, very much for joining. If you become a member, we will see you again later tonight if you'd like to join us for Film Club. But yeah, thanks, everybody, very much for being here. It's Gray Shirt Thursday. Gray Shirt Thursday, everybody. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah. Both got the grab.
Everybody
Russell,
get in on that?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of days are Gray Shirt days for me.
I got a lot of Dingus Day shirts. We're gonna do what we did with the Mardi Gras beads. We'll auction them off Sunday.
Yeah, there you go.
First person to sign up with a membership gets a shirt.
There you go.
I have 3 of them. I only really need 1.
Nice. All right, well, we got 610 filing in over on the YouTube side of things, and we got 293 over on Rumble. Smash that like button, smash that follow button, smash that subscribe button over here on YouTube. Why don't we jump right in and get started? There are some Iran talks that are in progress here. Marco Rubio made some news when he announced to the free press that if Iran wants a civilian nuclear program, they can have one, like many other countries, a departure from the hard line that Israel has been taking.
War. This is not a president that campaigned. We do not want to see war. This is not a president that campaigned on starting wars. And as he said very clearly, Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon, and he reserves every right to prevent that from happening, but he would prefer it not happen. He would prefer that there not be need to resort to military force either by us or anybody else. He would prefer that it be something that we can negotiate. The Iranians have shown a willingness to talk. We're going to talk to them. If there is a chance at peace, we're going to give peace and a peaceful resolution to this challenge, every opportunity to succeed. Our priorities remain the same. If Iran wants a civil nuclear program, they can have one just like many other countries in the world have one, and that is they import enriched material. Now, we're not going to negotiate this in the press. We're not going to negotiate this publicly because it undermines negotiations. But there's a pathway to a civil, peaceful nuclear program if they want one. But if they insist on enriching, then they will be the only country in the world that doesn't have a weapons program, quote unquote, but is enriching. And so I think that's problematic. But again, let's give peace every chance here to succeed. I don't want to see a war. The president certainly doesn't want to see one either.
So, like I said, bit of a departure from previous rhetoric. Rubio says Iran must stop nuclear enrichment, a condition Tehran says is unacceptable. So what he's saying is they can import enriched uranium, but they cannot enrich uranium themselves. Iran's foreign minister has said a nuclear deal is possible if the U.S. doesn't make unrealistic demands from antiwar.com by Dave DeCamp. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in an interview released on Wednesday that Iran cannot enrich uranium under any deal with the U.S., an idea Tehran has said is unacceptable. Rubio said that Iran could maintain a civilian nuclear program, but that it would have to import enriched uranium to use as fuel. If Iran wants a civilian nuclear program, they can have one just like many other countries in the world have one, and that is they import enriched material, he said on the podcast, Honestly, with Barry Weiss, which we just saw. Last week, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran's right to enrich uranium was non-negotiable. In response to Rubio's comments, a senior Iranian official told Reuters that zero enrichment is unacceptable. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, who has been leading the negotiations with Iran, previously suggested the U.S. would be happy with a deal that would cap Iran's nuclear enrichment at 3.67%, the same limit set by the 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA. That was Obama's deal that Trump scrapped in 2018. But after backlash from Iran hawks, Witkoff walked back the comments, saying Iran must end its enrichment program. Speaking of antiwar.com, I was on the Kyle Anzalone show yesterday. I had a great time. Thanks, Kyle, for having me on. And we talked a little bit about some of the changing rhetoric vis-a-vis these Trump-Iran negotiations. So this last piece of sound by Rubio that we just showed is the latest in a series of statements that they will make and then take back, make and then take back. So what Dave is referring to in the article is this piece of sound here, where Witkoff appears to suggest that Iran would be allowed to enrich uranium without having to suffer a strike at the hands of the United States and or the Israelis.
Through strength, it resonates throughout the world. This is not a threat on my part now. It is just a simple fact. The president means what he says, which is they cannot have a bomb. The conversation with the Iranians will be much about two critical points. One, enrichment. As you mentioned, they do not need to enrich past 3.67%. In some circumstances, they're at 60%. In other circumstances, 20%. That cannot be. And you do not need to run, as they claim, a civil nuclear program where you're enriching past 3.67%. So this is going to be much about verification on the enrichment program, and then ultimately verification on weaponization. That includes missiles, the type of missiles that they have stockpiled there, and it includes the trigger for a bomb.
So verification of enrichment and weapons programs, that's not good enough for the hardliners, of course. That really angered our friends at the Deep State.
Oh, my God.
Who gave him a talking to after that interview, apparently. Apparently it was the Deep State. Couldn't be him himself, couldn't be Trump himself.
Deep State strikes again.
The Deep State strikes again, because shortly after that, he walked that back. A deal with Iran will only be completed if it is a Trump deal. Any final arrangement must set a framework for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Middle East, meaning that Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization programs. So that is different rhetoric from what we just saw in the interview, which was limit and verify. This is now must stop and eliminate. So he got his mind right there. The article continues. Rubio said that when Witkoff mentioned the 3.67% limit, he was talking about the level of enrichment that they would be allowed, the level of enriched material that they would be allowed to import from outside. Yeah, that is some cope. That is not what he said. While Trump administration officials are making maximalist demands publicly, diplomacy between the U.S. and Iran continues to advance, suggesting the U.S. is not actually demanding zero enrichment in the talks. Rubio once again indicates that zero enrichment is the U.S. objective. So far, however, this has not been the U.S. position inside the talks, Trita Parsi, an Iran expert and executive vice president of the Quincy Institute, said in a post on X. Rubio is either saying this to play bad cop with Trump's blessing to keep that door open, or he is seeking to sabotage the talks, Parsi added. I think both are possible. I'm starting to think the former may be a bit more likely. Witkoff and Arachi are set to hold another round of negotiations in Oman this Saturday. At the same time, a meeting will be held at the expert level to discuss technical details of a potential deal. President Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if a deal isn't reached, even though his intelligence agencies recently reaffirmed that there's no evidence that Tehran is building a nuclear bomb or that Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has reversed his 2003 fatwa that banned the production of weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, I think that Rubio is playing bad cop here because I think what they realize now is that best case scenario, they're going to basically redraw Obama's nuclear deal. But that would make them look pretty fucking foolish, having canceled it 7 years ago and having started us down the road of having to renegotiate something again, lest a war break out. I think they have to look like they're being really tough and that whatever deal they make puts us on a path towards zero enrichment. That's what I think. I think it's a lot of chest pounding because I think just like in the tariffs, they realized that they started a fight they couldn't finish. And I don't think they want an all-out war with Iran. And so I think this is a way to save face. Well, we'll talk tough, and then behind the scenes, we'll settle on what was basically Obama's deal with a promise of, sometime soon getting to zero enrichment. The only thing they have to worry about, of course, are the Israelis, which we'll get to in the next part. But anything before we go there?
Yeah, CUCKS to the left of us and CUCKS to the right.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's
whole lot of cucking going on.
Exactly. That is Russell's take. Nice. Brief, concise, what do they call that? Tight take there. Tight take there. So Max, he mistyped here, which he corrected in a previous thing. This is the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokeswoman melts down when asked by RT if Israel would give up its nuclear weapons program if Iran halted enrichment. So this is the problem, okay? One of many problems, but this is kind of the big one. The question is, okay, if Iran denuclearizes, would Israel do the same? And how do you think this went? Take a guess, folks. We're about to hear 3 minutes of very, very reasonable foreign policy speak, I'm sure.
Have nuclear weapon, and this is what's in front of us. We understand it's not just a threat to Israel, but to the entire world.
What about Israel?
Israel is not posing a threat to anyone. We don't have any ambitions in any other country.
We don't have any ambitions in any other country.
In the entire Middle East.
They're in Syria. They're in Palestine.
They're in Lebanon.
They're in Lebanon.
Controlling Lebanon through Hezbollah, destroying its politics, destroying its social fabric, destroying its economy. They did the same thing in Syria. They do the same thing in Iraq. They do the same thing in Yemen, destroying the population, destroying the country, bringing them on the verge of starvation. And this is what they're attempting to do in Jordan. That's what they're doing in Africa. That's what's happening. Who's arming al-Shabaab? Who's training al-Shabaab in Somalia right now? What's happening in Central and South America? Hezbollah is the biggest controller of illegal drug and weapon trafficking routes in Central and South America. Trump's war on the cartel is not just about the illegal drugs and weapon and the threat of those gangs, but it's the Iranian threat. And so Iran is a threat to the entire world. And Israel is at the front line of stopping the worst enemy the world can. And I don't understand that question.
With all respect, the question was not about Iran. The question was about Israel.
Posing a threat on? Israel has never provoked, has never attacked unprovokably a neighboring country or someone else.
We have never attacked unprovokably.
On the defense of our country and our people. We have no ambition. When you hear the Ayatollah saying every single day about their ambitions, what about the Turkish ambitions?
They have no ambition.
What about what's happening in Syria? Do you ask those leadership about it?
Of course.
Well, Israel is the key for stabilizing the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
Nuclear program, Israel will do the same.
Israel is what's stabilizing the Middle East. Iran is what's destabilizing, arming, and terrorizing the entire population around. Do you know what we've been through? Not just the Israeli people, the Lebanese people, the Iranian people, the Yemenite people. They yearn for freedom, for food, for economical prosperity. And who's preventing that? Iran. This is the greatest enemy the world has.
Who's bombing Yemen? Who bombs Lebanon?
Who's committing a genocide that is a continuation of a 76-year long war crime that your nation, by definition, was born in?
Yeah. Who installed Al-Qaeda in Syria through an extraordinarily bloody civil war? That was all Iran did that?
No.
That was the United States and Israel.
Stabilizing the Middle East.
Yeah.
Stabilizing it. Yeah.
Wow.
Have during these days. And so disarming Iran is not Israel's interest. It's your interest. It's international community's interest. Try and imagine what is happening right now in the Middle East with with nuclear weapons. It's not just a threat on Israel. It's a threat on the entire world.
So, as Max said, that is just psychological projection, one point after the other. And when Aaron was hosting Jimmy's show, they got no talk about this, and Jimmy said, it sounds like Iran pursuing a nuclear weapon might actually bring stability to the Middle East, which I think is right. And Aaron said, I see your point, but ultimately we have to work towards denuclearization. I get both sides of that. Like, ideally, you want a world without these weapons. But it seems like one of the reasons why the United States and Israel are able to just run roughshod through the Middle East in all the ways that she just accused Iran of doing, ironically, is because they do not develop nuclear weapons yet. That would seem to be a deterrent that would bring more stability in the short term. Obviously, in the long term, we all want to get rid of these weapons. But it's just crazy how you see someone go up there and, fairly young woman here. Like, this is what we say all the time about the Israelis. They're brainwashed. I don't think she's consciously lying there. I think she really believes she is telling the truth there. That's how crazy they are.
Yes. Look, we have from October 8th, 2023, where we went out to the protests in Times Square. I got the two young women who had served in the IDF. And they just, they're not lying. The world's most moral army. The world's most moral army. We have no partner for peace. If you have a political disagreement, you come to the table and we talk. It's just so completely batshit. If you know anything about the history of the region of Israel as a state, of Palestinian attempts to secure their own state, of your own prime minister emphatically saying you would never allow such a state. Oh, you sit at the table? You have no partner for peace? They have a partner for peace? They're all just completely brainwashed. That's what really struck me when all this blew out into the open, because really, they kicked me out of Hebrew school when I was 9. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood, so I wasn't really exposed to those narratives for decades. Not intimately. It was amazing to me how it was the same stuff I heard as a child. Like the narrative, the world's most moral army, all this stuff, I had forgotten about it. It all came back to me. That is what they do. That is what the whole network of Hebrew schools does, as far as my experience. And I'm pretty sure this is the reality of what those schools do. Like, why do Jews in America all think that Zionism is part of their religion? Because they all go to Hebrew school and get indoctrinated with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's...
So what do you think it's like in Israel?
Right. Well, yeah. And this is what, Trump is dealing with here. I do believe that he doesn't want a war with Iran. I think he answers to a lot of people who do, and I think what he's kind of realizing now is that the best they can hope for to avoid this is to basically reinstate Obama's deal, which was not popular with the Iran hardliners at the time, certainly not popular with the Israelis at the time, and apparently not popular with John Fetterman either, who says, waste that shit. That's his take on Iran. In an interview with Free Beacon, Fetterman tells Trump to dump Iran talks and destroy Tehran's nuclear facilities. So John Fetterman just says, bombs away. Not interested in any negotiation there. So no help from him. Yeah. But that's what I think you're looking at. I think just like on the tariffs, I think they're realizing they're going to have to eat shit here at best. At worst, they are going to have to strike. Now, it's unclear what Israel will do if we don't back them. Do they have the capability to strike Iran on their own? Will they do it without our blessing? This was in the news last week. There was some tension there. There have been, as you saw in the Witkoff statement, statements that get made and then walked back and made and then walked back. You never really know. It's kind of futile to, I think, try and predict what's going to happen based on the day-to-day. Who knows? By the end of the day, somebody could come out and undo what Marco Rubio said just there. The war drums are beating, and I think if they want to avoid it, they're going to have to just, as in the tariff situation, take an L. Oh, sorry, never mind about all this. Let's just go back to the way it was before we almost blew it up.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that New York Times piece in the Hegseth section. But yeah, according to that reporting, Israel was trying to get the U.S. to do a joint strike on Iran where they would send in commandos and we would provide air support.
Right.
What they really need the U.S. for is to protect their airspace and their homeland from Iranian retaliation. That's why they won't do it without us. They just, as much as they have in terms of funding and weaponry from us, it's still, according to the reporting, not enough for them to really defend themselves against a full-on missile onslaught from Iran. That's why they need us to go in with them. And according to the reporting, Trump is inclined not to do it, as are certain key members of his staff, like Hegseth and Gabbard.
Right, and that's what makes me buy into the Rubio as bad cop theory, because they want to make it look to the Israelis like they're getting them a better deal than they are. Now, whether that's going to fly with them or not, I can tell you from a lifetime of experience in the tribe, we tend to be pretty pushy when we really want something. So I don't know if they're going to buy that, but we will see. We will see. That's where it stands now. Round 3 of talks is this Saturday. And so, you can follow the day-to-day developments, but there's really no point in doing so. That's why we haven't done that many segments on these talks. But this is kind of a good recap getting us to where we are, because you see statements get made and then taken back and made and then taken back, and we inch ever closer to a strike. I think as the stakes get higher, eventually, if Trump is not inclined to want to do this, which I do believe he's not, then they're going to have to convince the Israelis that they're getting more than perhaps they are.
Yes, and I don't understand, and we'll get more into this in the next segment. Very much like the first term, there's all this speculation about court intrigue and how AIPAC is, manipulating behind the scenes. And, I'm sure they are. If Trump is this strong leader that he's supposed to be, that goes on in any White House.
Right.
Where you have these different court intrigues and interests and cliques. Almost by definition, that's politics, right? So that shouldn't really make a difference, should it?
Right.
The Secretary of State, the Defense Secretary, they can't declare war.
Right. Exactly. Fertile Green, Keaton, stoked to see you on Kyle Angelone's show yesterday. Good discussion. Libertarians, anarchists, and the dirtbag left is all we got to turn this circus around. I had a great time. Yes, it was a lot of fun. Hillary Hinton, Bernie Sanders, and Finkelstein argue over how much of a tip to leave. Go. I said I don't want to be seated near the window. I said that's not their fault.
It's very drafty here.
It was very drafty here.
There's a draft. You seat us too close to the door.
You can't hold that against the server, Bernie. You're perpetuating some very negative stereotypes, and I do not wish to be associated with them.
Usually, I try to tip 20% to make up for the rest of my people, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception.
Kanye should get a note from his doctor on the side effect of blood pressure meds. What happened to him? Something happened to him abiding? But thank you for that. Brent Yoendo over on YouTube say the intro gets me every time. America can describe it in one word. Haha. Are there quotes off the top of your head to add if you were to do a 2.0 version? We are going to put together a 2.0
We've just been
version.
so freaking busy.
Yeah, so busy.
Yeah,
but
it needs a freshening up.
It does need a bit of a freshening up. Exactly. Brandon Guillory, thanks, Brandon, says, just like a nuclear reactor, Rubio is also water-cooled when the pressure is on. The podium never forgets. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that very much. All right, let's move right on along. Segment number 2, kind of a follow-up to last show. The Hegseth Whiskey Leaks continues.
Whiskey Leaks continues. So after we did our first segment about all of the Hegseth controversy, we got a lot of people who seemed to want us to take a closer look. They said our reporting had been debunked, so we looked at it more closely, to which we say,
you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I don't know that it's been debunked, but let's see. Okay, so this is really the source of the controversy. Pentagon in chaos after Hegseth sheds 4 staffers in one day. 3 definitely fired. 1, it's a he said, you can't fire me, I quit. No, we fired him. No, I quit. So this is the one there's some dispute about. John Olyott, he wrote an op-ed in Politico about how this all went down with the people who were fired. According to him, on Friday, Hegseth fired 3 of his most loyal senior staffers: Senior Advisor Dan Caldwell, Deputy Chief of Staff Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. In the aftermath, Defense Department officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously to reporters, claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigation ordered earlier this month. Yet none of this is true. While the department said that it would conduct polygraph tests as part of the probe, not one of the 3 has been given a lie detector test. So, a lot of people are saying this is part of a deep state op against Pete Hegseth because he voiced opposition to military intervention in Iran, and that the people who got fired are strongly against intervention in Iran, which is a strange contention to say that it's a deep state plot, but Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. So why did he fire people who supported his policy on Iran? That being the case, he'd want to hold them close. So if what you're saying is he was manipulated into it, you're saying he's a very weak leader, right? He's a very weak leader if he could be manipulated into throwing some of his closest allies, 2 of which he had worked with for many years, under the bus. You can't have it both ways. If he was that susceptible to a deep state plot, then he's probably unqualified for his job. Now, you want to
probably an incompetent pretty boy drunk who, is in over his head.
Yeah,
Probably.
I mean that to an outside observer, admittedly, I'm not in the Pentagon,
right,
but it looks that way to me. For
to
example, now if you really want somebody fighting against the deep state, right? Do you really want an incompetent drunk who's going to make it very easy for the deep state to discredit them? Because even if you feel that these leaks are coming from, AIPAC or Mossad or whatever, they didn't make them do these things. They didn't make them set up a meeting for Musk to sit in on China war plans that Trump had to squash because obviously there's a conflict of interest there, a pretty glaring one. He didn't make him share attack plans, war plans, in spite of the semantic games they want to play. Anybody who reads that chain, those are clearly war plans describing where they're going to hit, when they're going to hit, what weapon systems. I think most reasonable people would call those war plans. And if you were I did it, there'd be no debate about whether that was actually classified. We'd be going to jail for 25 years if any of us did what he did. According to Hegseth himself, he was very critical of Clinton's handling of classified information and Biden's too. He thought Biden should be prosecuted for having classified information in his garage. So by his own standards, he should be in prison right now, much less defense secretary. So nobody made him. It's not disputed. They're not disputing that this happened. It definitely happened. So they want to make the conversation about the leak, who leaked it, rather than that there was something to leak. Now, the argument that leakers are disgruntled employees, former employees and present employees who don't agree with policy, I mean, that's probably generally true, except for when leakers are manipulating the press, like Cheney with WMDs, leaking that to the New York Times. So, I mean, that's neither here nor there. Is the leak true? Clearly, this is true. They're not denying it. Okay, so nobody made him do this. Nobody made him bring his former Fox News anchor host wife with no security clearance to go sit in on sensitive meetings with foreign military officials. Nobody made him do that. Is that the deep state? Deep state made him share those war plans with his brother and again his wife. Did the deep state make him do this? So even if this is all a plot to discredit him, he's making himself eminently discreditable. Nobody made him an incompetent drunk. He did that all by himself. If you really care about these issues, you should probably want somebody with similar militant views on not intervening in Iran, although he is a Zionist maniac as well.
Yes.
But you should probably want somebody who's not an incompetent drunk who's going to do these things and make it so easy for the deep state to undermine and discredit them, even if that is what's happening. So this is really what some people are building their case off of. Trump was asked about what his policy was with Iran when Netanyahu was in town. Now, supposedly, according to some reporting from the Times, the cover story was that he was there about tariffs, but really he was there to talk about Iran.
I wouldn't say waved off. I'm not in a rush to do it because I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death. And I'd like to see that. That's my first option. If there's a second option, I think it would be very bad for Iran. And I think Iran is wanting to talk. I hope they're wanting to talk. It's going to be very good for them if they do. And I'd like to see Iran thrive in the future, do fantastically well. I know the Iranian people, they're incredible people. Always have been very smart, very energetic, very successful people. And I don't want to do anything that's
I used to buy my suits from a Persian.
I really don't, but
Wonderful
Iran
suits.
can't have a nuclear weapon. It's, pretty simple. It's really simple. We're not looking to take their industry. We're not looking to.
I'll tell you, that Princess Jasmine was a piece of ass.
All we're saying is you can't have a nuclear weapon.
These people, they had the first dirigibles. They were carpets. They used to fly around all over the Middle East.
The monkeys used to talk. It was a very
Great
place.
It was great. It was a
place.
wonderful place. Nobody ever saw anything
It's
like
a wonderful place. The monkeys would steal you an apple. You could eat.
So the theory, this should sound very familiar, if it's the Pompeo, it's Bolton. The guy's a strong leader, but he's being undermined all the time by his own choices somehow. The fact that he's not hesitant to fire people. How many attorney generals did he go through last time?
I think it was like 2.5, right? Because wasn't there an acting attorney general at the end? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the secretaries of state was revolving doors. So, if these people are undermining his policy, you should just fire them, right? I thought he's this strong leader, right? Okay, so this time Mike Waltz is playing that role. And this is what I'm talking about. So this New York Times article seems to be what a lot of people are basing their evidence on, that all of this is a deep state op against Pete Hegseth, possibly engineered by Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz is the enemy. So this is a very selective reading of this article. So Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged in his administration. So as we were talking about in the last segment, according to this article, The Israelis were trying to get the Americans to come in on a joint operation where their commandos would go in and take out the nuclear facilities while America provides air support and defense over Israeli airspace. And there was some division in the administration, and Trump basically told him no. But this is really the thing that is generating this theory. In a meeting this month, one of several discussions about the Israeli plan, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, presented a new intelligence assessment that said the buildup of American weaponry could potentially spark a wider conflict with Iran that the United States did not want. A range of officials echoed Ms. Gabbard's concerns in the various meetings. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Vice President J.D. Vance all voiced doubts about the attack. Even Mr. Waltz, frequently one of the most hawkish voices on Iran, was skeptical that Israel's plan could succeed without substantial American assistance. Now, do you see what I mean? Because I watch some of our peers in the space, some of whom we like and respect and have done good work in other places. But the reporting that I've seen that people brought to our attention, oh, this has been debunked, was very sloppy and very selective. And that's the best interpretation I could give to it. Never mentioned that. Never mentioned that in the same article being used as evidence, they cite Mr. Waltz as somebody who was actually against this strike. Now it says he's hawkish on Iran, but if this is all about getting these guys out of the way to attack Iran, shouldn't you inform people if you're going to try to make this case that, well, also in the article it says Waltz was also against this strike, but they didn't mention that.
Well, because they need a rotating villain. Just like the Democrats need rotating villains in the House. You know, there's always got to be some mole in the operation.
There's some
saboteur buried deep within the cabinet that's fucking it all up when the people we like are really doing the best they can.
Trump wants a big, beautiful, great America, and they're ruining it.
Right.
They're ruining it. So Dan Caldwell went on Tucker. He issued a joint statement. The three were fired: Caldwell, Colin Carroll, Darren Selnick. That they hadn't leaked any classified information as they were accused. So this is another case where people were extremely selective because they cited the Caldwell. As you will see, he does say he thinks that his position on non-intervention in Iran is a factor. He doesn't even say that's why they pushed him out. He says he thinks that was a factor. And the overall interview is interesting. I would recommend it. He talks about how veterans of his generation who were in Iraq and are in Afghanistan, they tend to be very skeptical, like Tulsi Gabbard, of these Middle Eastern interventions because of the experiences they had, because of the horrific toll it took on their fellow soldiers. He talks a lot about the rate of self-deletion among veterans of those wars. It's just, horrible and tragic. But something that they did not tell you in the reports that I saw that a lot of people are basing their assumptions on, he actually says that the other ones who got fired, they hold their views so close, he doesn't know what they are. That's pretty weird that they got fired for being against Iran when a guy who worked with them very closely, one of them for many years, Selnick, he had known him for years, doesn't even know what their politics are. So let's take a look at that.
So Darren Selnick, he doesn't sound like he is engaged in like the policy fights, or he's like some crazy ideologue.
So before I talk about Colin, Colin has not transitioned as far as I know. But I don't actually know what Darren Selnick and Colin Carroll think about Iran. Darren Selnick could be a secret 12er Shia for all I know. Colin Carroll could want to, nuke Iran until the sand glows. Darren was deputy chief of staff focused on back-end office operations and personnel and military health policy. Colin Carroll, let me talk about Colin because he's, I think, an incredible individual too. Colin was a Naval Academy graduate. He served as a recon Marine in combat. Then he literally became a rocket scientist, working in tech, working in companies like Anduril, and he was Steve Feinberg's chief of staff. Colin's focus was on science, R&E, and budget. He was down and in. And these gentlemen were patriots, and they did not deserve to, none of us deserve to get treated this way, but in some ways angers me more than what's going on with them.
Okay. Isn't it strange that people would go and tell their audiences with confidence that these people got fired because of Iran, and even reference this interview and make no mention of the fact that Caldwell specifically said he has no idea what these guys' politics are? They could want to nuke Iran till it glows and he wouldn't know, after working with them for years, which is very traditional with military people, to try to separate out their politics and not reveal them as long as they're serving. So apparently these are these kind of guys. So why would they be pushed out over their views on Iran, which nobody seemed to be clear? We have to assume that he worked with them personally, one of them for many years, didn't know what their politics were. Nobody in AIPAC would have known either. So why would you make this assumption? Now, he does go on and talk about how he thinks that he personally may have been targeted.
It's very obvious to me, having far fewer details than you have, that you're one of the people who is perceived to be standing in the way of a regime change war in Iran, and that was kind of your crime. That seems obvious to me.
I think it's complicated. There's other layers to this, but based on what has been happening since then, I think that is a factor. Is that I think, and it is being weaponized against me, is I think that they want to also go after, and I think that I can't say this with certainty, but just speculating, that had somebody in the White House not said, okay, we need to put a stop to this, there probably been more people treated the same way that Colin, Darren Selnick, and myself were treated.
Okay, so hey, I watched that whole interview. Seems like a very creditable, moral guy. But he's just offering an opinion about why he thinks he got pushed out, which frankly doesn't accord with his other statement that he doesn't know what the politics are of the other two who got fired. Now, the original reporting on this, and there's been more reporting on it, looks like this was what we originally said it was, a bureaucratic infight. The ladies were doing a little cat fight there in the Pentagon. We'll see a little more of that. And again, I'm not disparaging him. I'm really more critical of people who took this and gave a very distorted representation of this information to their listeners and to their viewers. You have a guy speculated it might have been Iran, and frankly, it doesn't really add up given that he's saying the other two were not known for their views on Iran. At that point, the reporting that this was a big bureaucratic infighting in a very incompetently run Pentagon sounds more on the mark. Now, Hegseth took a cold shower, had a little hair of the war dog that bit him, pulled himself together to make an appearance on Fox News, where, to his credit, Kilmeade actually asked him about his personal relationship and the fact that these guys didn't get any polygraph tests or any real due process, so to speak.
Mr. Secretary, did you find this out, or did they come to you? Because I know you know these guys. Like these are the guys you picked, especially Caldwell, and they worked for you for your previous job before you got over to Fox. And they said that they have not been asked about their phones. They weren't asked about communications. They didn't go through. They didn't take a polygraph. So why would they be let go and not be investigated?
Well, Brian, when there were a series of serious leaks at the Pentagon, which there were, Panama Canal plans, Elon Musk's visit, you name it, any number of things, and there's 4, 5, 6, 7 things. We said enough is enough. We're gonna launch a leak investigation, which we did, which was then handed over to OSI, which is the special investigators here at DOD. Right. Through that investigation, information was surfaced, which created a responsibility to take action. That's how it works when you you actually investigate leaks, Brian. So it's easy to say, oh, we asked everybody and everybody said they're good. Or you can take it seriously and say, we don't think leaks are okay at this department. So we're going to investigate. And when we investigate, we'll take it anywhere it leads. And unfortunately, Brian, to your point, and again, if one or two of these guys is exonerated after an investigation, great. That's what investigations are for. But we took it seriously. It led to some unfortunate places, people I have known for quite some time, but it's not my job to protect them. It's my job to protect national security, the president of the OJ, and those people will be prosecuted if necessary. The leakers know who they are, and we know over time the truth will be told, and we stand firm behind that. Leaking is not okay in national security policy, and we will stand behind that every day of the week.
It looks like Carol and Selnick intend to sue for wrongful termination. And again, they didn't ask to take a polygraph test. Do you know Joe Casper? Is he still your chief of staff? Is he leaving?
Joe's a great guy. He's a great American. He has done a fantastic job for us at the Defense Department, securing the southwest border, getting a beachhead here at the Pentagon. He's staying with us, going to be in a slightly different role, but he's not going anywhere, certainly not fired. You make changes over time, and we're grateful for everything Joe's done.
So you think there's a lot of people who don't want you there, and there's some type of deep state forces that want to make sure you don't stay there?
They've come after me from day one, just like they've come after President Trump. I mean, I've gotten a fraction of what President Trump got in that first term. What he's endured is superhuman. It's not hard for me to do this job. I know exactly why I'm here. To bring warfighting and the warfighting ethos back to the Pentagon, to rip out the insidious ideologies and not compromise and not back down, to bring in new press voices into the Pentagon, which we've done.
I'm here to keep the trans and the fat people out. That's what I'm here to do, and I know how to do that. God damn it!
Yeah.
I'm a culture
to
warrior.
reestablish standards and accountability, to not tolerate leakers, to 100% operational control of our border, to get rid of trans lunacy in the military.
You saw it coming.
Here's the thing.
You knew where he was
come
going
to
with
Washington, and they just play
no
the game.
more Heather has
and
two mommies
punch
around
ticket
this bitch.
and get along to go along, and start doing Meet the Press and going to the Council on Foreign Relations and spending time with all the new cocktail sipping crowd. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because President Trump asked me
I
to
drink
bring
alone.
warfighting back to the Pentagon every single day. That is our focus. And if people don't like it, they can come after me. No worries. I'm standing right here.
I am a solo day drinker. I have my bourbon in the back. I don't go to the cocktail parties for my drinks.
They need me to keep the trans insanity out. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a case of if there wasn't a deep state, they'd have to invent one to deflect. Now, taking all that as a whole, now you can believe that Dan Caldwell and the others who were fired are brave, anti-interventionist, deep state victims. Or you can believe that Pete Hegseth is a heroic fighter against the deep state. You can't believe both. You can't believe both because if they got fired at his direction, after knowing these guys, I think for over a decade, the two of them that got fired. I mean, that's look, man, I'm from the street. I'm from the old neighborhood, not to talk out of turn, not to be crude. That's a scumbag douchebag where I come from. Right. Some people spread some rumors about close friends of yours that had your back and you just throw them under the bus like that? That's a piece of shit. Why would you stand up for a guy? That's not a man. That's not even a man, much less a man who should be running the world's largest organization in the history of the world.
You're supposed to get the trans ideology out of the Pentagon, and you're not even a man.
And look at him. He's low T. He's low T. He looks scared in every interview I see him in. He
like
looks
Lloyd
like
Austin's
he's pleading.
Pentagon.
Yeah. He's pleading. He's
like
pleading.
the dressing room of Rent back there.
Yeah, it's like an episode of Glee.
Yeah,
this Pentagon.
Yeah.
As you will see, that's not too far from the truth, because it looks like this is all just a bitch fight among the ladies. But yeah, like how do you argue both of those things? Right? Like, if you believe these guys, then you should want Hegseth out. You should be maligning Hegseth. What a scumbag. He threw these brave anti-interventionists under the bus. Like, you can't argue Hegseth is an anti-interventionist, and that's why the deep state is after him, but he fired these
He fired
guys.
him. Right.
He's the one who fired him, and he's going on Fox and further dragging their names through the mud. So if you find what they say creditable, then you should be attacking Pete Hegseth, right? Pete Hegseth fired them.
Right. Well, they tried to blame Waltz. That was the thing. Waltz is the
They
Pompeo.
tried-
he's the John Bolton. He's the fall
John,
guy.
right. There's always somebody. And again, if he's such a weak leader, why would you want him? I mean, the deep state, right? It's a big, imposing force. You want a fucking weak-kneed drunk who has to fall back on the transes when you corner him? Come on.
Wow.
Now, Drop Site News put this out. I know we have our issues with Ryan Grimm, and I probably would not take this article too seriously, except that he got some of the key figures on the record. He got them to text and email and interview. So it looks like, at least according to their point of view, or what they want to put out there, it's pretty accurate. So on the night of April 3rd, Colin Carroll got a simple phone call that set off a chain of events leading to the roiling internal meltdown among top Pentagon staff that is now threatening to topple Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Carroll, who was chief of staff to the Deputy Defense Secretary, answered because he knew the number. It was Politico reporter Daniel Lippman, who just weeks earlier had penned a story taking Carroll apart as a bad boss who'd been fired in 2021 during the Biden administration. For that article, the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office had set up a call between Carroll and Lippman, and Carroll had commented on the record for the story. When Carroll answered, he asked Lippman if he was calling to apologize. Lippman was not. He had a new lead to ask about. He had heard that Pentagon Chief of Staff Joe Casper was facing an investigation by the Inspector General and wanted to know if Carroll could confirm. Carroll told him he knew nothing about it and ended the call. Now, this article has quotes from both Carroll and Casper, and what it degenerates into is a bitch fight. Basically, according to Casper, rumors were started that he was a drug user, and he offered Drop Site News to test him for 45 days to prove he's not a drug user. And Carroll reported to Dan Caldwell, that he had gotten this email from a reporter, and he was told to go to the spokesperson for the Pentagon with it and tell him about it. And apparently, and this is what happens when you have incompetent leadership, combined with a ginning up paranoia about leaks. Everybody's reporting on everybody. So according to this article, Carroll did as he was told. He sent the email, and then that email was used as evidence that he's leaking and trying to manipulate to create an inspector general report. And yeah, it just degenerated into a bitch fight. He said, she said, he's leaking, he's smearing him, and he's manipulating the boss, and they're trying to manipulate a IG investigation. It just fleshes out what the early reporting indicated, that all this is bureaucratic infighting inside the Pentagon, and Hegseth is too incompetent, too inexperienced, too small for the job to manage this kind of bureaucratic infighting that you would find in any large organization, much less the Pentagon. Based on everything we've looked at here, has absolutely nothing to do with Iran. Yes, Hegseth, according to one article from the New York Times, spoke against, doesn't even mean he's generally against striking Iran. Waltz is generally in favor of it. He was against this war plan too. Hegseth could be for attacking Iran, for all we know. But they did not like that particular war plan. That's all. That's all that says. And Caldwell made it clear. He doesn't even know what the other guy's politics were. So it's very unlikely that they were all driven out because they're fighting against Iran. And once again, if Hegseth is this non-interventionist, why would he fire all these non-interventionists? And if he did, doesn't that make him a big fat fucking pussy? So why would you support him? None of it makes any sense. Listen, for years, all the libs, all you had to do was say Russia. Even now, all you have to do is say Russia. They'll believe anything that you say. It's sad and tragic that so much of the alternative media serves the same purpose for so many that left the corporate media because they saw through it or theoretically saw through it. And yet all they have to do is say AIPAC, Israel, deep state, certain shibboleths, if they are invoked, just like Russia, that's it. It's been debunked. No need to look any further. Somebody with a microphone said some shit. So now it's real. That is part of what's very dangerous about this moment, because you do have these institutions have completely discredited themselves with things like Russiagate, with things like the lab leak theory. It's not that these sources are creditable or that people haven't rejected them for good reason, but the people coming up in their place who were supposed to be better are proving not only to not be better, but because there is not this institutional standards and practices, even the New York Times, which, I wouldn't use to line a birdcage, but when they printed that BS story about assaults on October 7th, they were forced by a revolt within their own newsroom to not follow through with it. They were going to do their show, a podcast about it, and they backed down. There are no standards like that at a lot of the alternative media. So in many respects, you've kind of replaced something that was bad in many ways with something that's arguably as bad, if not worse.
Well, in a lot of indie media, you don't have not all of indie media, but in a lot of it, you don't have the resources to go out and do fact finding. So when you say that something is debunked, what that really means in this case is that, no, we've gotten the cope from that already. Oh, no. Somebody put out the signal. Right. Here's the cope that you have to say. Here's what you have to convince yourself is the real truth behind this story. Why? I think they're very protective of Hegseth for the same reason that they were protective of Matt Gaetz until they couldn't be, because behind Matt Gaetz was Pam Bondi, who is by far the least popular of the Trump cabinet members because she's fucking them on the Epstein stuff. And so they're really upset that they didn't get the maverick renegade Matt Gaetz, because look who's waiting in the wings behind Matt Gaetz.
Well, they
Same
got
thing
to tell
here.
where are all
afraid.
these FBI people getting arrested.
Well, sure. Yes, he was their first choice. But I'm saying in Hegseth's case, they have created an image of him in their mind based on what? I don't know. The guy is a fanatical Zionist. The guy was a major Ukraine hawk until he wasn't. I mean, the guy, he's just a bimbo who reads off a prompter. What is he? I mean, I don't understand it. But for whatever reason, they have it in their mind that he is an anti-deep state warrior and a white knight, and that if he falls, he's going to be replaced by a swamp creature. And so even though he fired these people, it was under the direction of Mike Waltz, who, according to the very article that was quoted in a lot of these segments, is not in this particular moment even as hawkish on Iran as they say he is.
They didn't quote that part, though.
Right. Well, because word from the boss is he's trying to wiggle out of it. That was our first segment of the day, is that they're trying to figure out some way where they can claim victory to keep the Israelis happy without going to war with Iran. So yeah, I mean, the whole debunking of this was just narrative management and cope based on nothing, based on no information. There was no information to suggest that there was a coup against Pete Hegseth. Why would there be? Why would there be? The man just reads words off a prompter for a living. That's what he did until he got here. He's the perfect stooge. He's fanatically pro-Israel. You think at the end of the day he's going to take a stand for peace? Come on, he's going to do what he's told at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if those are your standards, you just want to be fed narratives. Why not watch corporate media? They have better graphics. They have better production values. What is it? You just like the chat? You just like hanging out in the chat? Is that why you watch that instead of MSNBC or Fox or, what's the point of it? It reminds me of the line in Educating Rita where he says, "You didn't find a better song to sing. You found a different song to sing." It's not that and with exceptions. A lot of people don't want something better. They want something more to their taste. They want to be able to select news a la carte.
A la carte. Yeah, exactly. And
I
social
like
media
this
is a great
opinion,
place to do
and
it.
this
yeah.
person feeds me that opinion.
Well, and I mean, on these social media sites is the best place to do it. I mean, YouTube, you literally see thumbnails of stories, and you get to pick which ones you want to watch. Right.
Yep.
Exactly. All right, we got 1,900 strong in the YouTube chat, 657 strong on Rumble. Coming up close to 666 likes. Let's get over there. We got 558 currently over on YouTube. Dan Kelly, thanks for the $5. We're all over the region with our troops spreading stabilization. No wonder they get along so well with D.C. 2 peas in a pod. Thank you, Dan. Mr. Fancy Pants, thanks for the $19.99, Mr. Fancy Pants. Technically in a work meeting right now, but I muted the sound so I can listen to DD. Hopefully I make you proud. You do. You make us very proud. Give you a heart for that one. Thank you. Alexander E. Tennant, thanks for the $5. Abby Hoffman used to say he was a Marxist-Leninist, as in Groucho Marx and John Lennon. Missed that guy. Yes, there you go. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Mark.
right. Another one is self-deleted.
Yeah. Sparky, thanks for the $10.
Right
Iran illustrated with True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. They could penetrate the Iron Dome at will by barely missing key locations on purpose, showing accuracy without provoking war. I suppose Hegseth could be paradoxically pro-Israel but anti-war, perhaps facilitated by alcoholism. I don't know, but there may be a significant factor missing. Hegseth is at the least incompetent. Yeah. Look, I think they're going to try and wiggle out of this. That's what it looks like to me. To me, that explains the rationale for Rubio saying that they can import enriched uranium but not enrich it themselves. They're going to try and figure out a way to tell the Israelis that they brought Iran to heel without demanding total denuclearization and without a war. That to me is their goal at the moment. Whether they will succeed, time will tell. There are a lot of unknowns in that. Abiding must be painful for virtue signaling LARPers realizing the only thing in between Trump and the warmongers is little old Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you. Abiding 71. Victor Shakapopoulos, that Kneecap band that protested Coachella, got famous because of last year's film, Kneecap. I heard it's good. Someone from the audience proposed it for a film night a week or so ago. Oh, okay. Interesting. I did not know that. Thank you, though. Appreciate that. Shut up, Israel. You had me at unprovocally. Thank you, EO Shush. Appreciate that very much. Matrix Mediator, ironically. Thank you, Matrix Mediator. Appreciate that very much. Thanks for your super chats and Rumble rants. They are super helpful. Appreciate that, folks. Smash that like button. Once again, 613 over on YouTube. How many likes we had over on Rumble here? 116. Let's smash that like button, everybody. Bring an even bigger crowd in here this afternoon. Okay. All right, folks. So this is a two-parter. This is the marquee segment of the day. Jordan Peterson made his way to the Joe Rogan podcast, and the results were, well, interesting. Caused quite a stir on Twitter. Somebody described, in fact, that it was Jimmy in his segment yesterday. He said it seemed like Jordan Peterson was brought in to play good cop to Douglas Murray's bad cop. You know, Douglas Murray just came in and reamed Rogan for having, anti-Israel people on the show.
Well, Joe, Zionists are just little people with a little dream.
Right, just have a
little dream of genocide and greater Israel.
A people without a land for a land without a people with a big dream. All right, let's take a look at Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan. So Andrew Torba tweets out, Peterson is on Rogan today. He's there to try and gaslight Joe into gatekeeping the, quote, psychopaths who dare to criticize Jews and Israel from being on his show. He claims these people do it for their own gain, when in reality they get debanked, demonized, and endlessly defamed for speaking the truth. So let's take a listen to this so we don't get in trouble again. A listen to Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan.
Conversation up, but it poked up and made itself manifest in that conversation. And the issue is, how do you identify the psychopathic pretenders? And it's even worse.
I don't know, maybe the guy with a suit that's 7 colors. I think that's one way.
Maybe the guy who literally takes his fashion tips from Batman villain rogues galleries.
Maybe the guy who leads a prayer session with Russell Brand. Maybe that.
Yeah,
those are some
maybe
indicators.
That guy. Yeah. Wearing a two-tone suit.
Yeah.
A la Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
Now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades.
Back it up a little
The
bit.
psychopathic pretenders. And it's even worse now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades. And they didn't, and they couldn't. And the left is not good at drawing barriers, partly temperamentally. The right is somewhat better, but there's no shortage of monstrosity there. And so then the question is, how do you draw the line? And that's kind of what I was, because I've been watching these right-wing, they're not right-wing, these psychopathic types manipulate.
Can't call them right wing. That's my bread and butter. That's my bread and butter. I have to, oh no, not right wing. The psychopathic types. They're not good at barriers. The left we know are not good at barriers. That's why they have so much anal sex. They don't understand barriers. The right, however, should be better.
The edge of the conservative movement for their own gain. And a lot of that's cloaked in anti-Semitic guise. There's plenty of anti-Semitism on the left, too, by the way. So it's not unique to the right.
Well,
but
particularly now.
Particularly now. It's Rogan going full Piers Morgan there. Just like not paying attention to anything Dave Smith said the whole show. Yeah. This is what I mean. They all do this. They all revert back to a zero knowledge assumption. Right, to not step on the guest. Toes.
I mean, this is why that clip was going around of him making fun of Douglas Murray. I'm not gonna pump that up. Rogan. You'll see flashes of the old Rogan here and there for 5 minutes, but at this point, he has owned by Silicon Valley tattooed on his anus.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is what makes the accusation that he is so anti-Israel so absurd. And this is what it really reveals the Zionists for just how maniacal and, dare I say, woke they are. But that's the next piece. We have a two-parter where this is the more material part about Israel, and then we're going to get into the who's woke, woke on first, as we'll call the next segment.
Yes, particularly now. And so, you've let your curiosity guide you. Your curiosity and your desire for knowledge, this quest, you've let that guide you as a podcaster. And by the way, I'm trying to work through exactly the same sort of thing. How do you know, given your radical increase in stature over the last 10 years, how do you know when your curiosity and even your skepticism about the fact that things aren't the way that people say they are, because that's certainly been demonstrated in the last 10 years, how should anyone decide what guardrails to put up? Like, what do you look for? Do you have a conceptual system worked out for that? Like, because
what guardrails do you put up? So now all this, and this is a guy, by the way, who was decredentialed, if you will. I don't know what the word is, but the Canadians took away his license to practice for mean tweets, and now he's advocating guardrails be put up. Now, who is he referring to when he talks about the psychopaths? Is he talking about the Dave Smiths and the anti-Zionist guests, or is he talking about the Daryl Cooper? It's probably both. When it comes to the anti-Zionist woke right, as they call them, he's just wrong on the substance. And once again, even when it comes to a guy like Daryl Cooper, you're a guy who went and led a fucking prayer session with Russell Brand on stage. I'm sorry. Like, even in the Daryl Cooper example, for a guy like Peterson to raise that, lay with fleas, whatever. Lay with dogs, you're going to get fleas. You wake up with fleas. I mean, the idea that they have not nurtured this ecosystem and are surprised to see that on the so-called fringes are people who have opinions that are, particularly in this context, out of step with his boss, Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire, for whom he makes a lot of money and for whom and by whom he gets paid quite a lot of money. So it's clear that he's probably talking about both.
Watching these two, it just really is such a demonstration of the consequences of censorship and repression. If you had just let Jordan Peterson be this kind of offbeat Canadian psychologist with this Kermit the Frog voice, who was challenging some orthodoxy about feminism and permissive parenting, and you had just brought him on some shows and had some debates, most people never would have heard of this fucking guy.
Right.
Joe Rogan, if you had just fucking left him alone, let him have heterodox views that don't conform to all of liberal orthodoxy of the current year, he would have remained a basically left-oriented kind of a guy, which is what he was. By forcing them to pick a side, you not only push them both much more into a conservative right-wing perspective and ecosystem than they ever, I believe, would have been otherwise. You created a groundswell of support for that kind of content that would not have existed if it was not in response to such clear and constant suppression of open debate and conversation.
Right. And that is very much the water in which a guy like Daryl Cooper swims. And because a lot of these people are such fanatical Zionists, they can't tell the difference between a guy like Daryl Cooper and a guy like Dave Smith, right? You know, to them, well, opposition to Israel, that's just anti-Semitic, which means you're all in the Hitler lover category. That's how they see it. But Dave realized that he was talking about him, or at least he interpreted it that way, which is not unreasonable in my view. He says, I've always admired many things about Jordan Peterson, particularly maps of meaning and his initial rise to fame taking on the woke insanity. I was pleasantly surprised that he complimented the three of us from the debate on Joe Rogan Experience. That's about as good as I could expect from a Daily Wire employee. I was a bit surprised at his take on keeping the psychopaths away. Now, I'm just a non-expert comic who's never been, but it seems sloppy for a clinical psychologist to just throw out a mass diagnosis like this. Ian Carroll.
Oh, maybe that's why he's unlicensed.
Yeah. Ian Carroll also got the sense that Peterson was describing the likes of him. The Douglas Murray approach didn't work. Now let's try the Jordan Peterson approach and see if that works. Now we're just going to keep doing free speech and talking about the evidence and facts. Thanks, though. Candace Owens realized he was talking about her as well. And there's a history there, of course, which we'll get into in the next piece. C.C. Jordan Peterson in the USSR psychiatry was turned into a tool of repression. Ouch. Jack Posobiec, who is like Candace Owens, a big Christ is King guy, he tweeted this out. So you see, there are there's a big rift that's opening up now, and I think the reason it's opening up is because Trump is failing. Right, winning. It's easy to keep everybody happy when you're winning. When you start to eat shit, that's when these fractures happen. But Jack Posobiec says Jordan Peterson appears on Hannity and promotes his report linking Christ is King to political extremism. He then criticizes internet anonymity as a cause of extremism. Hannity does not push back. You think Sean Hannity understands a word of what this guy's about to say? Sean Hannity's a construction worker from Long Island. You know, back when he was on, you know, they were all on talk radio. You know, the talk radio guys always feud. That's like part of the shtick. Everybody has to hate every other host. Michael Savage used to call Sean Hannity Wallbanger. That was his nickname for Sean Hannity, the Wallbanger. He was a construction guy from Long Island. But here is Jordan Peterson kind of doubling down, this time making explicit reference to the Christ is King anti-Israel rights.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between the political and the psychological and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian. They use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic. They want unearned social status and reputation. They're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy.
Okay, dude. How much of a lack of self-awareness can you have? Like, you're describing your entire space.
Right.
You're describing the
Exactly.
space that you make your income from.
That's the whole
pretty
space.
Pretty much, almost every host in that space could be described that way.
Right. Exactly.
And parasitical and predatory, and they're sadistic.
What,
so
Dave
they
Rubin?
take positive
You're not
delight in
describing
the
Dave Rubin now?
unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving.
Sounds a lot like Israelis.
Sounds a lot like Israelis, and it sounds a lot like the whole fucking MAGA movement, frankly.
Yeah.
Frankly. I mean, that's why they were so susceptible to this white South African shit.
Right, exactly.
Because their whole movement is basically, look, they had been accused of this for years. As our friend Anise said, nobody's argued that that's an oversimplification more than we have. After the election, I'm not saying every person, but a lot of them pretty much went ahead and proved that it is a white grievance movement, that it's about, and I see it when we debate people now. You know, they'll go right to, you forgot about white people. They didn't used to say that shit out loud. They feel empowered now. You smug city people, you left the white people behind.
White people behind.
I mean, look, it was very obvious. You're yelling that people from South and Central America, many of whom are victims of our foreign policy, unlike white South Africans, have no right to be here, no matter what they're suffering in their home country. But you burst into tears when you hear about allegations, not even facts, allegations, that white South Africans are being murdered. It's a fucking emergency to you. But you're not a racist? You're not a white supremacist? What he's describing, it's remarkable to me, because this is the movement that he's one of the advertisers of.
Oh, and it's cashed in
every
on.
word of this describes MAGA.
Yeah, MAGA, and particularly the Zionists. When you talk about reparations, what is Israel if not a reparations project? They'll never admit that. They'll say, well, we have roots in the land. They know that's nonsense. That's why they don't allow for DNA tests there. They know it's all about reparations.
Yeah.
Okay,
no,
now the way
look at me and Keaton. Don't we look like we're from the Negev?
Yeah, exactly.
Make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as king as a manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically on the right. And this report identified the same sort of people on the left. But it's not primarily political. They're wolves in sheep's clothing who look for where there's power and value and then adopt those beliefs as a surface camouflage so that they can elevate their moral status. Now, and this has become worse in recent years, as far as I'm concerned, because the evolved strategies that we have for dealing with these psychopathic types, psychopathic narcissistic types, don't work well online. And so the psychopaths can get away with their terrible manipulations online, and they can find like-minded people, and they can escape from any reputational consequences. And so there's always been psychopaths. Those are the Pharisees, for example, that Christ points to, the religious pretenders. Those are the people who use God's name in vain and claim moral virtue and even religious devotion. Well, all they're doing is feathering their own nests and furthering their own narrow interests. And the web, social media, anonymity enables them to organize and also hides them much more effectively. And this is a problem in religious organizations, it's a problem in political organizations, and it pathologizes the whole culture. You know, most people, 80% of Americans agree on virtually everything. And then there's these fringe people, and they're not political. They're psychopathological narcissists who cloak themselves in political guise. And we all have to learn to distinguish between the political and the psychological. We're not good at it.
Can you explain?
Talk about every accusation as a confession. I mean, he just described his employer.
Can you explain what the hell you're talking about? That's what it goes on to say. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously,
you work for Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Dave Rubin is in your space. Russell Brand, who you go and, I mean, this is why I say, no offense to religious people. I don't think it has to be that. But if prostitution is the world's oldest profession, religion is the world's oldest grift. All these grifters get in on that. He knows there's a sizable portion of his audience that will pay good money to hear him go on about Jesus. Like Jordan Peterson believes any of that.
Well, this is part of why he has to frame it as psychological and not political. What do you mean it's not political? Of course it's political. These people have your politics. You're talking about people who basically have your politics, except for this one issue where they step out of line. And that's not allowed. It's not allowed broadly, especially not allowed at the Daily Wire. And so you have to come up with some way to categorize them that absolves you of moral responsibility for having feathered your nest, to borrow from what he said, with their subscription dollars. Like, it's their people. This whole intra-right fight about the woke right versus the non-woke right, you're all, listen, at the end of the day, Trump unites you all. And given this administration's record on free speech, given the fact that this administration has gone super woke for Israel in ways that you would have, you would plaster the airwaves with wall-to-wall content if a Democratic administration did this for any other group. Yep. But you can't really go there. And so you have to come up with some way to describe this as it's pathological. It's narcissism. It's a spiritual pathological narcissism. I mean, he should have been Kamala's fucking speechwriter if she won. I mean, that was a word salad that is bigger than anything she's ever tossed up. He's an overrated person. I've never found him to be an impressive person. Just a bloviating, fucking self-important midwit. I mean, that's basically what that was. Coming up with an excuse for why you don't actually own this tiny faction of the right, which he describes, 4% out of where you get that number from. But he knows that there's a splintering off on the right over this Israel issue, which we said that was going to happen before Trump won the election. And after he won, we said, all right, count down the days, everybody, because January 20th is when this grift is going to expire. You're going to have to pick. You're either pro-Trump or you're anti-Israel. You can't be both. People like Candace Owens now are starting to say, hey, you know what? I don't even know if I'm like a conservative anymore. She's been very critical of Trump's handling of like free speech on this. She's been kind of breaking away a little bit. Hopefully that continues. But the Daily Wire people, especially Jordan Peterson, who's not Shapiro, right? It's not in his fucking blood to be a fanatical. Like, he's in a very precarious spot. On the one hand, he's got to disown these people, but he also has to act as if he didn't cash in on them for all these years. Right. They are very much of him and of his space.
Right. Yeah, it's, psychologists, psychiatrists have not surprisingly a very high percentage of mental illness and self-deletion. A lot of people who have issues are attracted to that field because they're trying to figure themselves out. And, anybody who's dealt with a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, this is not true of all of them, but it's true of the worst of them, that they will use the jargon of psychology to try to gain leverage in social situations. I've known many psychologists who do what he's doing here, who you get in a personal argument with them, they start diagnosing.
Right. They start psychoanalyzing you.
They start psychoanalyzing it as a defense, which, right there suggests to me that you don't have the wisdom or maturity to be counseling anybody, if that's something that you feel is your first resort in a conflict, is to start falling back on jargon to try to minimize the other person's argument.
Well, that's what she tweets there. A tool of repression. You're weaponizing this psychological jargon to make a very political point. What do you mean they're not political? Of course they're political. They're just
Right.
political in a way that you can't own. And so
Right.
you have to disown them some other way.
Right, and to what you're saying about his qualifications as an intellectual, this is why I say, man, his career was made by the libs trying to suppress his speeches and his writings. If they had just left this guy alone, he never would have blown up like that. And he was saying certain things that the libs were furiously trying to prevent conversation about, like that in countries. I mean, this is what he claimed. I'm not going to claim it, but this is one of the things he said that went viral pretty early on. He was being interviewed by a female journalist, and he was talking about how in countries where they have higher standards of equality for women, women tend to fall back into more traditional roles rather than less. I think he used Iceland as an example, where women actually wind up staying in the home more. This was what he claimed in this clip. I'm not going to argue it one way or the other. And then, writing a book where you've got a generation of really fucked up, confused men, giving them some kind of guidance, to cast that inherently as right wing and wrong. Well, you know what? Maybe if you had not had a meltdown about Jordan Peterson, you wouldn't have opened the door for Andrew Tate, because that's what came behind him, because of the way you reacted to what was a relatively benign suggestion to make your bed and clean your room, right? Like it said a lot about modern liberalism that they found the mere suggestion of personal responsibility as an antidote to modern male malaise such a threat, so threatening. Yeah, they made him. Like he would have been, man, the bookshelves at Barnes and Noble are full of self-help books like what he wrote. But because they made such an issue of it, now you got Jordan Two-Face there as this major media figure, which he never would have been.
Yeah. So Candace Owens obviously, realized she was being called out there with the Christ is King. So just a reminder, this kind of goes back to the Candace Owens Daily Wire Fallout. Andrew Clavin talks about Christ is King, and she says, "Thank you for re-upping this most crucial conversation about Christ is King." And then, of course, that followed with a Jordan Peterson quote tweet. Candace Owens is a true pharisaical pretender. She vociferously proclaims her devotion to Christ for no other reason than to elevate her perceived status. Again, with the diagnosis, right?
Yeah, and I also get the impression she's pretty serious about that shit.
I think so.
I don't smell grift when she starts the Jesus stuff. I do when Jordan starts invoking Jesus.
Right. Glenn Greenwald tweets out here, how come Rumeysa Öztürk, a foreign national in the U.S. legally, is in prison for having written an op-ed critical of Israel, but Jordan Peterson, a foreign national in the U.S., is free to praise Israel and call Americans who oppose it psychopaths? And Douglas Murray. That's right. They're both foreigners coming here expressing foreign policy views that we don't like. So maybe if a president who we like gets in, they can be deported for opposing our foreign policy interests, for being a barrier to our foreign
race
policy
to the
interests.
bottom.
Exactly. All right, we're going to roll right into part 2 of this segment. So the Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan podcast caused quite the stir online, and a big part of it had to do with who's the woke right and who is not the woke right. We'll call this segment Woke on First. Who's woke, who's not? So the guy who may have founded this term, he certainly popularized it, it's certainly attributed to him, is a guy named James Lindsay, who in this interview with Michael Malice explains why he uses the term woke right. So we just have to set the stage a little bit here. Just a warning, folks, the audio and video in this segment is a bit tedious. These guys really know how to talk a lot and say very little, but we have no choice but to endure it. That is our cross to bear for the next few minutes.
Woke up to the
all this we did for thee.
Yeah, exactly.
Woke means having woke up to the true structure of reality, and it's actually structured by systems of power that generate oppression. And it's always this kind of like victim mentality is built right in. So it's in identity politics. So it's people like me who are oppressed, unless you have like the white guilt thing. And then it's like people like those poor victims are oppressed, with the empathy stick. And so woke means that. It doesn't mean left. It doesn't mean necessarily believes in Marxist stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that you care too much about race, although that's often implicated as part of the structural beliefs about reality. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're pro-trans. It means that you believe that there is a oppressor-based structure to social reality that colors your entire interpretation of reality. Then you could add one further thing, because the woke actually do believe there's a duty of conscience that comes with this. The belief about oppression is that oppression is a dynamic. It's not that there's oppressor and oppressed as two separate things. They are two poles in a dynamic of oppression. So oppression creates an oppressed that's being done by an oppressor. So they're intrinsically linked. And the belief, at least from Marxism, from page 2, I guess, of the Communist Manifesto, the main body of it, is explicitly that this is the engine. This is what it actually means for history to move. The entirety of human history is the history of the antagonism of classes. And so the oppressor versus oppressed is actually there in that first paragraph. So woke means that you woke up to this. Okay, fine.
Okay. Now, then he gets into what woke right is. So as you can see, this is where the cultural Marxism point comes from, because they're not saying that it's literally Marxism. They're saying that because Karl Marx felt that class conflict was permanent, perpetual, and inevitable, therefore the wokesters are applying that paradigm of permanent and unavoidable conflict to other areas. Race, right? Religion, sexuality, etc.
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned, so when I first started seeing this kind of conversation, which was not really that long ago in the great scheme of things, because liberalism, leftism for my entire life had been predicated on the idea of a kind of liberal universalism where everyone's equal and, color blindness. When I saw all of these conversations that were very much the opposite, that it's racist to not emphasize race. I mean, that's in complete contradiction to, literally over a century of thinking about race relations. I didn't understand it. And with the trans conversation and gender, I was like, what the fuck is this? So because these conversations were being so heavily suppressed, it was very hard to find any books that analyzed it in any way other than reinforcing it. So his book, I forget the name of the co-author, it was a woman co-author. He wrote a book, Cynical Theories. That was the first thing I ever read explaining what the hell this even was. I gotta say, I've learned a lot more about it since, and it was not a bad primer on where all of this came from. But it's another example of what we were saying about Rogan and Peterson. Because at that time, look, the academics are usually liberals. So the only people who were qualified really to get into Judith Butler and all of the different progenitors of wokeness and critical theory, which is really the focus of the book, it tended to be libs. Like, that book is very much written from the perspective of traditional liberals aghast at this movement that had that claimed to be an evolution of what they believed in, but I think properly was seen by many as a poor substitute and really a contradiction of many of the most idealistic beliefs of liberalism. Over time, I've seen Lindsay since. Over time, he went crazy. Over time, he went. They all did. They all did. Because if they want to make a living, they can't make a living among the libs. They're ejected. And I think once you go into that space, it's one road leads to another road. You have to start catering to the audience that you have. And I think it's easy to go that way when the people on the other side are trying to destroy you. So why not just embrace this ideology?
Well, but this is why to use wokeness as a pejorative and to call it a form of Marxism is to play hide the ball, in my opinion, with the fundamental, undeniable paradigm of society and societal conflict, which is, yes, class-based oppression. People with power seek to hold it and put their foot on the necks of people without power. And in capitalist societies, the source of power is wealth. And so it's not some postmodern, weird talk to actually say that no, Marxism is, in my opinion, an accurate critique of power dynamics within a society. Now, what they want to do is they want to play hide the ball with that. They don't want to admit that such power dynamics exist. That whether you are a right-wing neoliberal or a right-wing fascist, they all deny the inevitable power struggle between the haves and the have-nots. They must, because their whole view of society is predicated upon the idea that those imbalances are very easily transcended through liberty and market forces, right? So they have to just deny that, and they have to kind of smear Marxism by equating it with wokeness, with, these people who are just obsessed with identity politics and looking for oppression where there is none, right? That's where they have to take that. Now here is where he goes.
However, there is part of that just on an analysis basis. This is where a lot of our Marxist friends will get upset at the term cultural Marxism, rightly so. But did they take some DNA from Marxism to create the critical theory? Yeah, like that core idea of the world being divided between oppressed and oppressors. Yes, did they take that basic theory? And this is why corporations loved this. They took the economics out of it and they put identity in its place.
Well,
so
yes,
now the oppressed and the oppressor are all identity groups.
Well, they took something very material and made something very abstract with it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's what they did. And so, okay, so that's where the cultural Marxism thing comes from. Now, here he goes on to describe more specifically the woke right.
What does woke right mean? Well, we often think of it as woke left. I've been actually being much more precise for a couple of years and saying woke woke Marxism to describe what I'm talking about on the left, because I think it is derived from Marxism. So woke right are the basic definition is going to be people who act like the woke, although this is a very weak definition. People who act like the woke, same tactics, same victim mentality, same identity politics, same poor me, same, kind of very instrumental use of language, very instrumental use of knowledge, of concepts, of lies. That means justify the end. So lying and smearing and canceling and struggle sessions are all on the table in order to gain ideological growth or consensus, but also to gain obviously power. And so, but that do so using so-called right-wing traditionalist values.
Okay, so you get kind of an idea of what he means by the woke right. We won't dissect that any further for now because we have plenty more to go. But Jordan Peterson references Lindsay in a rant egged on by Rogan about the quote-unquote woke right. Now, if you thought the last word salad was tough, wait till you get a taste of this one.
Virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well,
without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I think what they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no, what he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head, oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is.
It's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas. for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem. The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits. They're Machiavellian, they're sadistic. That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas, and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain, right?
Another not so veiled shot at the Christ is King people, at the anti-Zionist right-wingers, because to Jordan Peterson, and I would assume to James Lindsay, the anti-Israel right are the woke right, because they see the world through oppressor and oppressed. Well, I'm sorry, that fucking applies in a lot of cases, especially to Israel-Palestine. This is what I mean. Their whole worldview is to hide the ball about that. They don't want to acknowledge that power imbalance is a real thing. They want to, they must create in the public mind that power is temporary, and it can very easily be transferred through cooperation, through free markets, right? Through liberalism. At the end of the day. The idea of permanent conflict is very threatening to them because that leads to revolution. And they don't want to give any credibility to that way of viewing the world. That's why the Petersons and the Lindsays, they consider the anti-Israel right to be the woke right. So James Lindsay, Jordan Peterson, there are psychopaths on both sides. Normal people, yeah, obviously, so what? Woke right. So here's James Lindsay again, tweeting in response to this Rogan episode. How dare he say this? Oh my God, Jordan Peterson is the real psycho. He's bad for us and our movement. So see, in their vision of things, the woke right are the ones who, in this case, in this specific case of Israel-Palestine, accurately identify a permanent and inherent power imbalance. And they don't like that. So they call them woke. As we'll see in a minute, it's actually the Zionist right who are the wokest of them all. Under the I will admit, elusive definition of the word. This is the kind of thing, this is one of the things that's difficult about doing this segment, is a lot of people rightfully argue that woke as a pejorative is a bastardization of what woke actually means. Right. And now this is like a bastardization of a bastardization, right? Because now you have two sides arguing over which bastardized version of the word applies to their group. And in doing so, they bastardize it even further.
Yeah, not to go spinning off into a tangent, but I have pretty much zero patience for language evolves, and that's bad, and the original meaning was different, so you can't use the word. Shut the fuck up. Okay, I don't ever want to hear you use the word slave again, because it's based in Slav, because there were so many Slavic slaves. Okay? All right?
Yeah, no, but
you would have to throw out half the vocabulary if you want to go back to every word that meant something else. Yeah, woke meant one thing. Now it means another. A word means what people commonly think it means. It doesn't matter what it used to mean. It's interesting if you want to trace it back to get an understanding from a sociological or cultural perspective, how that word evolved and its meaning changed to people. It doesn't mean what it meant 50 years ago, and that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't have to. Are you saying there's no language to describe the thing that it originally meant to describe? You absolutely have to use that word. And if so, use a new one. Like, that's the language. It drifts, linguistic drift.
I mean,
there's nothing you can do about it.
In this case, it is more of just like a subset of people who started using this word over and over and over again.
Sure, and it came to mean something else.
But yeah, so
that's the history of language. It happens.
Yeah, but this is how that happens too, isn't that? Now you're going to have a debate within that section of people who are saying, "Well, no, you're actually woke. No, you're woke. You're woke." So this is what this turns into now. The woke right is coming in hot. So this is a Zionist saying the woke right is coming in hot. We got to call out anti-Semitism from every angle because it's all around us. So this is extremely confusing.
Guys, so I've been sitting with this for a while, and I just need to say it. So we've spent so much time fighting anti-Semitism on the far left, which is incredibly obvious. We've seen this bleed into the Democratic Party like crazy. You know, we keep seeing the Democrats in Congress and in Senate consistently voting against Israel. But right now, the woke right is coming in hot. And look, guys, I back Trump. I am beyond grateful for the work that he is doing right now to finally enforce real consequences for anti-Semitism, pulling federal funding from these universities, holding these terrorist reporters accountable. This is what we have waited for far too long. But we have Tucker Carlson, we have Joe Rogan, we have Candace Owens. These people that are loudly pushing these very dangerous narratives like minimizing the threat of Iran, whitewashing Qatar, mocking Israel. I am not talking about just a few one-off comments. This is a pattern. And these are people who have called out the squad for their radical ideologies, but now they are repeating some of the exact same anti-Semitic talking points. Suddenly, Iran's not a threat. Suddenly, Israel's the aggressor and Qatar's a partner.
Okay, so you see what she's doing. She's calling them the woke right for the same reason that Jordan Peterson is, and that I'm assuming James Lindsay would. So Nico House.
Would you get that high from a Flavor Flav garage sale?
Yeah. Nico House says, lady, you are the woke right. Learn what words mean before you use them. Yeah, exactly. And here to explain that a little more is Glenn Greenwald, who got a question about this. And he gives what I think is an absolutely perfect answer. So he was asked about Konstantin Kassin labeling, the Tuckers and the Candace Owens, the sort of more anti-Israel right, as woke. Here's how he answers this. This goes on for a few minutes, but it's worth watching.
Carl Malone, and he asks, what do you think of Konstantin Kissin's response by declaring Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and maybe Dave Smith as the woke right?
I'm so happy to have this question. Honestly, I was thinking about doing a show on this. I just don't like doing segments about people who I don't think deserve full segments. It's a good way to get attention into that kind of conflict and controversy sells, but I just don't regard Konstantin Kissin as sufficiently noteworthy to do like a waste of segment on him. But since you asked, the insult phrase that they have come up with to talk about Tucker and Candace is the woke right. And this is why it's so hilarious and such projection and so ironic, because for years, people like Konstantin Kissin, the only reason we know his name is he was part of that like anti-woke faction that arose after Me Too, but especially the Black Lives Matter protests, like Barry Weiss. They all branded on like, oh, we're such heterodox thinkers. We reject the woke ideology of the left. And the thing they hated most about the woke ideology of the left, according to them, was that it was all based on victimhood. It was all based on group identity. It was all based on this claim that the United States and the world is filled with all kinds of bigotry and all kinds of discrimination that is directed at Black people or Muslims or women or trans people or whoever. And this was all crybaby behavior, according to this anti-woke faction that emerged. This is just a left-wing attempt to turn themselves into victims, to whine constantly, to claim that they were the victims of systemic discrimination. That was what mostly the critique of the woke left was that it was like identity-based victimhood narratives, and at the same time that they were demanding to be shielded from ideas that they disliked based on the grounds that it made them unsafe, and that was mocked as being childlike. Okay. Now, over the last year, we have heard nothing. Like, the primary narrative has been from the pro-Israel right, of which Konstantin Kissin is a part, exactly all the things that they have claimed define the sinister parts of the woke left. Oh, I'm the group of which I'm a member, Jews, are now the unique target of violent bigotry. We're the ones that are the victims. We are unsafe. We need protections. We're not even safe to walk on the streets in Europe anymore because people hate us so much. We can't even go on campus because we hear these genocidal chants that need to be stopped and the people on them need to be punished. That's the woke right. The woke right are the people who believe that who identify themselves as part of their demographic group, in this case Jews, and who have created this narrative that comes exactly from the woke left that they've spent the last however many years mocking, that their group is the true victim group, that their group is confronting this dangerous form of hatred and prejudice and discrimination and bigotry, that there's all these things going on around them that make them unsafe, feeling unsafe on campuses. They need more protection from administrators. Administrators should be fired for not acting to protect them enough. To call critics of Israel the woke right is 180 degrees the opposite of the reality. And the people that are the ones that are constantly engaging in group-based self-discrimination and victimhood narratives, namely since October 7th, pro-Israel Jews and their supporters, are the ones that have been peddling what had been defined as the woke left, the core ideas and tactics of the woke left forever. The woke right are the Konstantin Kissins of the world who believe that, oh, it just so happens that the group into which I was born, with which I most identify, we're the real victim
All
group.
of these other guys, when they do it, it's just
whiny, petulant.
But this time is actually
this is the real bigotry against me and my group. And that's the bigotry that the government and administrators need to act to protect.
Which is also
exactly. And that gets to the key distinction here between what James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson describes as the woke right and what the actual woke right is. The Lindsays and the Peterson, these are conservatives who want to obscure the existence of power imbalances and power dynamics. And so they see identification of power imbalances as woke. What is actually woke, as Greenwald says, is not simply the recognition of power imbalances, but to put yourself at the center of that, to make yourself a unique victim of that, and to insist that you, as a member of a particularly victimized group, have special rights and privileges that other groups, oppressed or not, do not have. And that describes to a T the pro-Israel right. Obviously, we're going to do a story later in the stream. The NIH is withholding grants from schools that boycott Israel.
It's woke. It's wokeness on steroids.
Right. It's not the recognition of conflict. It's to place yourself as the most vulnerable member within a conflict and insist that the world walk on eggshells around you. That is what wokeness is. And that is, of course, the Zionist playbook from A to Z. From A to Z. They are the woke right. And so there is an insidiousness about obscuring that, and there's another insidiousness about claiming all recognition of oppression and power imbalance as woke. And that's what they do. Well, if you're pro-Palestine, it means you think that the Palestinians are oppressed. That makes you woke. No, that makes you fucking that makes you woke in the real sense of the word. That makes you awake, right? And that's why I would argue that, yeah, sometimes the jujitsu of wordplay does matter a little bit, because to actually be awake to reality is not to be woke in the pejorative sense.
Well, their idea of woke very much applies to them and always has. I mean, their whole movement, if you want to call it that, is built around grievance and the idea that they're being oppressed by liberal ideology, right? They've been left out. They've been oppressed. It's just wokeness for white people.
Right, exactly.
You know, I mean, that's all it is, really. I mean, if again, you look at the South Africa thing, all of a sudden these white farmers are needing of special protection. You know, it's not that they're against wokeness. They just don't like it being applied to blacks and gay people and trans people. They love wokeness being applied to Israelis and white people.
Exactly. So the final verdict
safe
is, of course,
spaces, all that. We just saw that with Nancy Mace.
Of course.
She felt so threatened. So where's all the commentary from Trigonometry about how Nancy Mace is a snowflake who needs to be driven out of Congress? Why aren't they all over that?
Well, you know who did call her out for that is Matt Walsh, and that's why I'm saying there is a rift here that's emerging, and it's all emerging around this Israel issue. Because
Matt Walsh also called out that rabbi who literally did the Ibram X. Kendi thing and said it's not enough to be against not be anti-Semitic. You have to be anti-Semitic.
Well, this is I mean, and there is this rift happening now, and it's happening because this Israel issue is it's too severe and too ever present to ignore. And so it's forcing these rifts. And now you can actually say, hey, who among you is acting the wokest? It's certainly not the Candace Owens people. It's the people like the woman in the car. Yeah, no, we need special rules to protect my group because my group is uniquely vulnerable. That's woke in the parlance of our times. Ryan Spence, thanks for the $2. Brian Kilmeade could have been cast in The Substance. Yeah, he looked like a little like Dennis Quaid in The Substance. Sparky, thanks for the $5. It's a tried and true technique in bureaucracies to go after a supervisor's underlings first, reducing their power so it's easier to delete them. President Trump seems to stick by his so-called friends, often to the point of his own detriment, so he probably won't appreciate Hegseth selling out his own friends. We will see, man. The rumors are they're looking for a replacement. We will see.
Once again, Caldwell himself said he doesn't even know what the politics of these people are.
Right.
So so you can't argue that they got driven out because of their ideological views. And again, Hegseth did the firing.
Right. He did it. He did it. Brad Gilbert says IDF not being successful without U.S. is not U.S. stay out. Pete Gone, who Benny's Zio Neo C crying. I don't know who would benefit from him being out. I don't understand where this image of him as this sort of anti-establishment maverick comes from. He's a Fox News talking head stooge who parroted the pro-Ukraine talking points when he got paid to do it. He's pro-Iraq war as of fairly recently. I don't remember the date we covered that.
Yes.
And he's pro-Israel. I mean, what threat is he to anybody? That's just cope. Luke Saul, thanks for the
he's a threat to all gender bathrooms. I'll give you that.
He's a threat to all gender bathrooms. Yeah. Shane the Pain, thanks for the $10. Masterclass Astrology by Jordan Peterson. I'm in. Thank you. Pete Sweet, thanks for the $5. Did Peterson learn projection in his psychology education like he's talking into a mirror? That's right. Ultimata says Peterson has the soulless Anthony Blinken eyes. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to some Rumble rants over here. Remember, Zion Nazis hate Arabs more than they want a country of their own. Killer Yitten says, dirtbag, since clowns ruthlessly murdering people is basically our foreign policy, I suggest Terrifier for the next DD movie night. That is a little gory, but yes. Oh, so by the way, folks, in case you missed the top of the show, 8 p.m. tonight, movie night, Duck Soup, Marx Brothers comedy. A little light, some a little fun.
We need to laugh.
We need to laugh a little bit. Some broad humor. Secretary Hegseth, Future Drunken History Podcast episode. Thank you. Free Shit 77 says, or the deep state invented them and are laughing their asses off at all of us. They are giving everyone Havana syndrome.
I'm so wasted.
Eric Rousseau says, new Pope betting line. Luis Antonio Tegel, even Petro Paulin, Robert Sarah plus 800, Pierre Batista Pizzaballa plus 1,000. Oh no, we're behind Sarah. Oh, come on, got to be Pizzaballa. Is there a bit of confusion on the Hegseth leaks? The leaks Hegseth are talking about is top aides were not screwing the caps on the flasks tight enough, and those flasks leaked and were dry as a bone. Thank you, E.O. Shush. Appreciate that. If we're going to deport people for their tattoos, could we at least start with Hegseth? Thank you, Gina.
Many have made that point.
Yes. Sonny D. Beat. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a Catholic by the toe. If you catch him, make him holler. Pierre Batista Pizzaballa. There we go. Make him holler. I like that one.
That really should be like a sidewalk chalk hopscotch-like game.
Yeah. That would be a good one. Noah Goop, it's weird seeing some people celebrate Trump passing Ukraine off to Europe. I thought we were against the war because of the mass death and risk of escalation. Ukraine, sad, me happy, kind of dumb in my opinion. Yeah, I believe in an end to the war. Yeah, that's the goal here, is an end to the war. Now, I think the war will end quicker without us funding it. But yeah, I think we should want the war to end because it's bad to have hundreds of thousands of people dying, meat grinder. Hegseth puts the gin and ginning up paranoia. Thank you, Gina. And Heidi. Otacon, Hegseth, more like HIC Seth, the whiskey bottle. Down, you sloppy drunk. Thank you, Otacon. Appreciate that. Replace Hegseth with poo poo pee pee man. Thank you, because appreciate that. Yes.
Listen, man, I wish I could show that movie on movie night because maybe he'll eventually get his $1 million distribution deal because that movie was fucking funny, man.
There you go.
I'm not saying it was a perfect film, but it was pretty funny.
Hamhawk says, gentlemen, for a surprise, I'm getting better reception on Rumble than YouTube. Sorry about the gentleman crack, you dirtbags. No, it's okay. I heard there was a little bit of a technical thing with YouTube. Some people in the chat were having it. If you run into it, just refresh, and it seems to work. All right, let's move on. China.
All right, so let's do a quick recap. This was George Soros' protege, now Treasury Secretary Bessent, just a couple short weeks ago, just not long after Liberation Day, April 2nd, said this about China and the position we've put them in.
Has maximum negotiating leverage right here, right now. And I think it would be a mistake for anyone to think otherwise. And as I said, many of our trading partners, they have queued up and they have kept their cool. They have not escalated, and they will get priority in the queue. I think it was a big mistake, this Chinese escalation, because they're playing with a pair of traditionally, if you look at the history of the trade negotiations, we are the deficit country. So what do we lose by the Chinese raising tariffs on us? We export 1/5 to them of what they export to us. So that is a losing hand for them.
Yeah, apparently China's shifting to Brazil as their main source of soybeans. Soybean farmers would argue that they're losing something, but Bessent has probably never met a farmer in his life. Closest he's ever gotten to a farmer is his kid's CNC rig. So here's Washington's favorite sugar baby since Lady Bird Johnson. Breaking it down. We got China right where we want them.
The president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. There's no difference between China and any other country except they are much larger. And China wants what we have, what every country wants, what we have, the American consumer. Or to put it another way, they need our money. So the president, again, has made it quite clear that he's open to a deal with China, but China needs to make a deal with the United States of America.
Okay, so in other words, hey, man, ball's in your court, China. We got this. We could just wait you out. Ooh, you feel that burn. Now, here's not long after this, our illustrious president informed us that they've been having very productive conversations with China.
Came in, he took all the sanctions off. China wasn't allowed to buy. I said, if you buy, because they're the biggest customer, I said, you buy 1 barrel of oil, just 1 barrel of oil from Iran, and you can't do business in the United States. And by the way, we have nice conversations going with China just to intercede, it's like really very good. But with Iran.
Okay, so keep that in mind. He was claiming that we're having very good conversations with Iran, with China. What was that? April 18th. All right, so that was last week. Okay, so this is a few days later, April 22nd. Trump caved again. I mean, that's spin, but let's see. Let's see what he said.
145% is very high, and it won't be that high. Not going to be that high. It got up to there. We were talking about fentanyl, where, various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. No, I'm not going to mention COVID. I'm not going to say, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. They're going to be very nice, and we'll see what happens. But
we're not going to mention COVID. We're not going to say you fucked the whole world up.
Yeah, we're not actually going to do any of the shit I said I was going to do a month ago because they're not blinking.
Go to covid.org. We talk a lot of shit about them there, but we'll print shit about them on a website, but we're not actually going to say that to their face.
Turns out a 5,000-year-old civilization that's endured great hardship over the course of its history doesn't sweat me.
Yeah.
That's what we've learned over the last few weeks. So here's Scott.
We do what the best negotiators do. We troll them on the internet, but we don't actually bring that up in the negotiation.
That's something that goes all the way back to Machiavelli. Thou shalt troll them on the internet. So here is Besant whistling a very, very different tune.
An opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Right. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together. This is an incredible opportunity. I think if Bridgewater
so different.
Ray Dalio
3 weeks.
were to write something, he could call it a beautiful rebalancing.
3 weeks ago, China, you're fucked. We're the deficit country. You're screwed. You better come to the table. All of a sudden, he sounds very different. He sounds much more conciliatory now. Monday, the stock market started down, and then it popped because it leaked that he had been telling investors that they're not going to continue this tariff regime with China. Now you saw Trump, I think the next day, starting to walk it back. Nah, I'm not going to say to Xi, hey, we're going to keep these tariffs. No, I'm going to give him a soapy hand job, and I'm going to ask him what he wants because this is destroying my presidency faster than I ever imagined possible. So now you remember he said the talks were ongoing with China. They were having very nice conversations. Not according to China. China says no ongoing trade talks with the U.S., calls for canceling unilateral tariffs. So here's another one of their base spokespeople, not the one we call based Matthew Miller. This is another one, but just as based.
An opportunity.
Whoops. Sorry about that.
这些都是假消息。
Gao Jikun.
据我了解
，fake news.
中美双方
let's take that back a little bit. So that phrase is caught on even
fake
over
news.
there.
How do you like it?
这些
The
都是假消
reports
息。
are fake news.
据我了解，
As far as I
中美
know,
双
China
方
and the United
并没有
States
就
have
关
not
税问
held
题
consultations
进
or
行磋商
negotiations
或
on the
谈判，
tariff issue,
更谈不上
let
达
alone
成
reached
协
an
议。
agreement. So Trump
这
lied.
场关税战
This
是
tariff
由
war
美
was
方发起，
initiated by the United
中
States,
方
and
的态
China's
度是
attitude
一
is
贯的、
consistent
明
and
确
clear.
的，打
If you want to fight, we will fight to
大门
the
敞
end.
开。
If you want to
对话
talk, the
谈判
door is open.
必须是平等、
Dialogue and
尊
negotiation
重、
must be
互惠
equal,
的。
respectful, and mutually beneficial.
我们看到的
What
事
we
实
have
是，
seen
美
is that
方
the
滥施
U.S.'s
关税，
abuse of
严重
tariffs
破坏
has
世贸
seriously
组织规则，
undermined
损
WTO
害的是
rules
各国
and
人民的
harmed
共
the
同利
common
益。
interests of people of all countries. Keep doing these weird long shots.
我想再次强调，
I would like to
这场
emphasize
关税
once
战
again that
是
this
美方
tariff
发
war
动
was
的，
initiated
中
by
方
the
的态
United
度
States,
是一贯
and
的、
China's
明确
position
的。
is consistent
如
and
果美
clear.
方真的
If
想
the
通
U.S.
过对
truly
话
wants
谈
to
判
settle
来
the
解决
issue
问题，
through
就
dialogue
应
and
该放弃
negotiation,
极
it
限
should
施压力，
abandon the exertion
停
of
止
maximum
威胁
pressure,
诡诈，
stop
在
intimidation
平
and
等、尊
blackmailing,
重、
and
互
engage in
惠
a
的基础
dialogue
上
with China
跟
on the
中方对
basis of
话。
equality, respect, and mutual benefit. Yeah. So we showed them. Whoops. Keep doing this. There we go. All right. China on Thursday said that there were no ongoing discussions with the U.S. on tariffs, despite indications from the White House this week that there would be some easing in tensions with Beijing. Quote, at present, there are absolutely no negotiations on the economy and trade between China and the U.S., Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yadang told reporters in Mandarin, translated by CNBC. He added that all sayings regarding progress on bilateral talks should be dismissed. Quote, if the U.S. really wants to resolve the problem, It should cancel all the unilateral measures on China, he said. The Commerce Ministry's comments echoed those of Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Gao Jiakun, who said on Thursday afternoon that there were no ongoing talks, according to state media. Both spokespersons held to the official line that China would be willing to talk to the U.S., subject to Beijing being treated as an equal. Quote, China definitely wants to see the trade war de-escalate as it hurts both economies, said Yue Su, principal economist, China at the Economist Intelligence Institute. However, due to the inconsistency of Trump's policies and the lack of clarity around what he actually wants, China's strategy has shifted from focusing on what you need to what I need. Their request for the U.S. to cancel unilateral tariffs reflects that shift. So basically, Trump is so all over the place that they say, fuck it. We're just going to say you need to drop the tariffs, and we can't play this on and off game with the U.S. So some funny reactions to this. The American bully threw a stupid tariff punch and got clocked in the face by reality. Now he's backpedaling like a clown on a unicycle. Another commenter said, a predictable outcome when you surround yourself with knuckleheads. And I will interject, like George Soros's protege, which it's amazing to me. Nobody's claiming that Trump is a deep state op. He appointed Soros's guy as his point man on the economy. Maybe Trump's the deep state, don't you think? Maybe. Why would he be working with George Soros that way? Trump should stay in his position. He is the perfect narcissistic clown that will sink the empire. Well, I have noticed a certain spring in the step of a lot of our accelerationist friends since this presidency began. That's for sure. Now, a lot of copium, predictably. Liberals against Trump fail to understand negotiation tactics. This is funny. He is still in the negotiation. Go read Art of the Deal before you comment. Funny how you all are running with the same talking points as the CCP mouthpieces were running earlier today. We can see what side you are on.
Guilty as charged, my friend.
Guilty as charged. So yeah, it's just a disaster. And clearly they're kind of laying the ground to climb down off the ledge. Of course, they will find a way to claim victory. And China, the way that I read them, they're canny enough to maybe try to, they understand how Trump thinks. Throw them like something that'll allow them to claim a tremendous victory. Yeah,
Right.
okay, you can tariff Crocs. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So how does it work out then that, because this is starting to remind me of the Ukraine war in a way where, at the start of it, I really knew very little about that whole topic. I'm not a Cold War kid, I'm a 9/11 kid. So, my understanding of geopolitics, war and peace was about the Middle Eastern conflicts, not the Eastern Europe conflict. So I didn't really know anything about it, but I knew essentially that Ukraine had no chance to win and that they would be much better off just accepting the terms that Russia laid out before the invasion. Same thing here. I don't know anything about global trade and, that kind of economics. I know very little about it. But how did I then know better than these people? How was it that I was able to say from the outset, yeah, this is a horrible idea, no chance of success. It can only end in either capitulation or ruin.
Right.
And it seems like they have chose capitulation. They have chose to just back down. So how is it that a guy like me who doesn't know anything about this stuff can see this coming, but these people can't? Why is that?
I think there's the arrogance of power. I think that's an element of it. I think if you're Scott Bessent and you crashed the British pound with your criminal boss, George Soros, you think you're a master of the universe and you can't be wrong. Trump is certainly prone to a narcissistic inflation of his own abilities and insights, but he's really like the cowardly lion. You know, you just wrap him in the nose with a newspaper and he runs away. I mean, that's a pattern with him. I think there's also the susceptibility of experts to groupthink. And you know, that's part of the arrogance of power. I know media professionals who, you know, a lot of the nerd channels will point this out with a lot of pride. Everyone was saying that the Hollywood studios were headed for a complete catastrophe because they were offering a product that nobody wanted. That was very obvious. But I know people in the media that I argued this with, and they were just absolutely convinced that what Hollywood is doing is right, and this is great, and the numbers look good, and it's all going to work. And yeah, man, that's because that's the danger. Like, once you have a profession like this, everybody winds up reinforcing everybody else's biases and assumptions. And remember, a lot of those biases and assumptions are not based on deductive reasoning, it's inductive reasoning. There are cultural and philosophical reasons they want to believe certain things. So they just reinforce each other's biases to find a theoretical framework that will allow them to proceed with doing what they want to do. And they come up with very complex charts and equations to basically express their own wish fulfillment, right? They want the world to work this way. And that to me is a description of their entire economic policy. They theoretically, and I accept that at least at the top with Trump, this is probably true, that he does want to prove that he can bring back jobs for the working class. But the obvious proven way to do that under current circumstances would be with massive government investment in infrastructure and job training, right? It would be New Deal. But ideologically, they can't do that.
Right.
So you wind up having all of these, I mean, on paper, smart people just tying themselves up in knots to find a theory that would justify, yeah, we're going to create jobs for people without doing any of the things that you should do to do that. You know what? Tariffs. We're going to tariff China and all the factories are going to come back here. They got to come up with something, right? That's what they convinced themselves of.
Yep, but they signaled defeat from very, very early on. You know, the Chinese are very stoic people.
And we are not.
And we are not. We have no stoicism.
There's a country of people on cheese whiz and antidepressants.
Yeah, no, it took
You're
a
not
Dave
getting
Portnoy,
them to ride out a trade war.
No, it took a Dave Portnoy webcam meltdown and a couple of panic tweets from Bill Ackman, and that was it. At that point, we showed weakness. And once you show weakness, especially against an adversary like the Chinese, that's it. You're done. They're done.
Right.
They could have waited us out 2 years. They didn't even have to wait us out a month.
Right.
That's it. That's it. Pretty obvious. How many people we got in here? 2,062. That's good for one of these. And 988 likes in the YouTube chat. Thanks, everybody.
Guess where I think I'm going to go after this, because it's a lovely day, and I did bring my bike up here. I'm going to ride out to Rick James's grave.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
That's one of the things I've been meaning to do here. I haven't gotten around to.
Ultimata says Peterson has the soulless Anthony Blinken eyes. Thank you, Ultimata. Rentier oligarch Peterson is claiming these nefarious psychopaths are only seeking money and power, but for some reason choose to oppose the extremely well-funded and powerful Zionist lobby. Make it make sense. Good point, Rentier oligarch. The Yuppies, thanks for the $5, says Pete Eggsack is a weakling who would use his state affiliation to get out of a breathalyzer test. Thank you. Brad Gilbert, how do those who control the media not know Streisand? Ha. Tony H., prisons are built with stones of law, brothels with bricks of religion. William Blake, marriage of heaven and hell. Thank you for that. Sparky, thanks for the $10. I'm old enough to remember when there was actual anti-Semitism in the U.S. I haven't seen or heard even a hint of it in decades, despite recent attempts to gin it up by Israel. There's some on X, but that is to Israel's benefit, and it is of their creation. Brad Gilbert, woke is literally past tense, not awake to the now. Interesting. RBGH fam, thanks for the $10. Curious what you guys' thoughts on our freedom of association versus discrimination laws, and if terrorism laws are just a political cudgel that both parties use against one another. Well, the terrorism accusation is a way to shut down speech, which obviously has implications for freedom of association. Pardon me. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a weapon that is wielded for political purposes, which is why it's very dangerous, because that ties up what the courts can do as well. It limits what they can do, because a lot of that is, relegated to the executive. Glenn is an international treasure, says Mark Pugliese. Thanks for the $2. Charles, thanks for the $5. Do you think these softer public statements are intentionally covering for the actual hardline demands to manipulate consent and falsely justify a war? Perhaps, but I do think they want to avoid a war. I mean, I do think that, they want to figure out a way out of this that does not get them there. I do, because
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think they realize it's going to be a fucking disaster.
I mean, they couldn't last 3 weeks in a tariff war against China. We're going to fight Iran. I mean, I think they have enough common sense to understand that can't possibly go well. And so they're trying to get out of it. Free shit, I can help you, Jordan. How do you sound like a critical thinker and still support genocide? Use cucumber melon body lotion on your forehead to prevent wrinkles. Thank you, free shit. Appreciate that. Lay with a flea, get an egg up your ass, or however it goes. Yeah, whatever the phrase is. Yeah. Damon Wolf, funny how Peterson is calling for guardrails on the conversation when he turned one tiny free speech issue years ago into a giant grifting career. Exactly. Neither side understands free speech anymore. No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, this is a guy who had his credentials stripped from him for mean tweets, and now he's talking about guardrails. By the way, Kurt laughed and said he'll instantly text Rogan when he heard the story about Andreessen being full of it from Jimmy. Never heard how Rogan reacted. Interesting. Genitilis, if I could travel back in time, I would absolutely stop Peterson's parents from beating him to death with that thesaurus. Thank you. Otacon, I hate JP with a passion. Just go back to Russia and OD on benzos again. Great value Joker with a cheap suit. Most Christians are virtue signaling hypocrites who cherry pick the Bible. Thank you, Eric. So can Dr. Peterson help me with my future Chinese AI sex robot girlfriend relationship? Thank you for that. Noah Goop. Oops, sorry, Noah Goop. I accidentally deleted your Rumble rant. Sorry, I owe you $1. I meant to put it on the screen, and I hit the trash icon. So I owe you $1, my friend. Writer Mark Leiner might say of JP he has autoerotic repetitive motion disorder. Thank you, Free Shit 77. Appreciate that. Okay, all right. Let's keep it on here. Kind of coming down the home stretch, folks. Couple more. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. All right. Where's my slideshow at? There it is. Okay, folks. So remember how when Jay Bhattacharya was appointed head of the NIH, we thought, oh, they're finally something we can get behind. How bad could this be? Certainly, there's no way that Trump's subservience to Israel can interfere at the NIH, could it? Well, here we go. Glenn Greenwald, under new guidelines released by the National Institute of Health, any medical researchers will have all funds terminated if they support a boycott of Israel. They can support a boycott of any other country or even other U.S. states, just not Israel. So here's the highlighted text. Sorry, I got to full screen this here. Effective with the issuance of this notice, the following terms and conditions applies. Recipients must comply with all applicable federal anti-discrimination laws material to the government's payment decisions for purposes of 31 U.S.C. blah, 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 whatever the numbers are. Discriminatory prohibited boycott means refusing to deal, cutting commercial relations, or otherwise limiting commercial relations specifically with Israeli companies or companies doing business with Israel or authorized by, licensed by, or organized under the laws of Israel to do business. Wow. By accepting the grant award, recipients certifying that they do not engage and will not, during the term of this award, engage in a discriminatory prohibited boycott, obviously specified Israel above. A research institute could be close to developing treatments or cures for cancer or Alzheimer's, but will lose NIH grants unless they certify they don't support a boycott of Israel. I was happy Dr. Jay Bhattacharya was made NIH director given his free speech advocacy, and yet, ... Yet indeed. So Li Fong had a great piece about this. I encourage you guys to check out Li Fong's Substack. See, Li Fong does independent media the right way.
Yes.
He's the guy who keeps the standards high, right?
Yeah,
Trump
you know what? I do not always agree with his takes, but they're always honest.
Yes.
They never read like, well, that was a profitable take.
Right, exactly. Yes, so he says he has the same issue we have. He'll gain subscribers and lose them and gain them and lose them. That's how you know you're doing something right. So lifong.substack.com is worth it. Trump administration enacts vast censorship of American scientists over Israel. Research institutes and universities may engage in boycotts or divestment to pressure any country or government entity in the world. Recent institutional boycotts include measures to protest corporations that do business in North Carolina and China. That right no longer exists when it comes to protests of Israel. Researchers and university employees who engage in certain nonviolent protests or political expression over human rights conditions in Israel may risk civil and criminal penalties, according to a new policy unveiled by the National Institutes of Health yesterday. The agency, the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world, touches virtually every corner of the scientific community. The blanket boycott suppression is a radical expansion of so-called anti-BDS rules that restrict Americans from boycotting or simply advocating divestment from Israel-related businesses. The new NIH policy, which mirrors anti-BDS laws applied to contractors in 38 states, now silences hundreds of thousands of researchers. It applies to all domestic recipients of new, renewal, supplement, or continuation awards issued starting April 21st. Simultaneously, the administration is waging a wide-ranging showdown with several universities. The fight hinges on several issues, including the issue of academic research and speech rights regarding Israel. Federal research funds to Harvard, Columbia, Cornell, and other schools have been revoked or frozen, in part in order to force local universities into adopting speech codes related to Israel and to allow the government to place various Middle East studies departments into academic receivership. Such brazen attacks on the First Amendment have only accelerated. Just as other forms of censorship are justified as necessary tools to combat hate, misinformation, or bigotry, the Trump administration and its allies have argued that draconian measures are necessary to stop the scourge of anti-Semitism. David Friedman, the former Trump ambassador to Israel, spoke at an Israeli government conference last month and discussed the need to crack down on anti-Semites using government power. So this is the guy who had Mike Huckabee's job from 2017 through 2020. Here he is. Trump's accountant and Israel ambassador, oh, there you go, talk about hiring people close to you, David Friedman boasts about how governments like ours have the power to define anti-Semitism, to silence and deport critics of Israel.
Hey, you've been doing my books for a long time. You want to be the ambassador to Israel?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You guys are good at that, I hear.
On the right and
I
on
hear,
the left,
I hear
I'm
your
equal
people are
opportunity.
naturals.
Right.
On the right and on the left, I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, none of them are any good. On the right, on the left, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it. But the government, the United States government, or the government of France, or the government of any other country, has the power to rein in anti-Semitism in a much more effective way. And you know, people say, well, you know, the governments are not in the business of changing the way people think. That's true, but, you know, to my thinking, most people who are, you know, anti-Semites, most of these people running around, we're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds. So, you know, how are we going to, there's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
There you go. Just saying it
fucking pig
right out loud. Such brazen attacks on the First... Oops, sorry. Repeats The new broadside to reshape NIH funding will ripple across all major research areas and impact tens of thousands of grants. The NIH's $48 billion budget helps fuel a wide variety of medical and scientific research and impacts nearly every major university in the country. Those found in violation of the Israel boycott speech-related rules could be forced to pay significant fines and could also be found liable for potential criminal penalties. The NIH rules are also wildly ambiguous. The policy defines illegal discrimination as any boycott limiting commercial relations with Israeli companies or with companies doing business in or with Israel or organized under the laws of Israel to do business. That broad statement could apply to a vast array of corporate entities. Nearly every Fortune 500 company has a subsidiary in Israel, and therefore any major corporation could assert the policy when silencing an American scientist. That's a pretty important point there. The censorship order also undermines the promises of the newly installed NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who faced suppression of his research about pandemic policies. He was resolute when he promised an era of free expression under his watch. Yeah, this hurts. And it's funny because, I mentioned Jay Bhattacharya in the last show. I said, even the guys who you like and you think, well, I'm glad they're there, they're going to end up with shit on their face by being too close to Donald Trump. And sure enough, the next broadcast, here we are. What an example this is. So here he is during his confirmation.
Glad you highlighted but I'm really glad you highlighted the role of censorship and restriction of scientific discussion. It was so refreshing to me to be allowed to speak my scientific views in Florida during the pandemic. I think the root problem, a pandemic is a very difficult thing. There's so many people are going to have different ideas in an environment of uncertainty. The root problem was that people who had alternative ideas were suppressed. I personally was subject to censorship by the actions of the Biden administration during the pandemic. Science, to succeed, needs free speech. It needs an environment where there's tolerance for dissent. And the reason I think why Florida did so well was that it provided an outlet for that dissent, so that the government of Florida, the state of Florida, could adopt the best ideas for its. It's not that no mistakes were ever made. You can't say that of any state in a pandemic. But in order to do well, you have to allow people to speak with each other openly, even when the ideas are controversial.
Unless they don't like Israel. All right.
Yep.
If you're working on a grant.
That's the exception.
If you're that close to curing cancer, but you don't like Israel, then your grant gets cut off. And, it's even worse than that. NIH moving to ban grants to universities with DEI programs and Israel boycott. So it's not just the Israel boycott that they don't like. They also don't like DEI. Talk about irony wrapped within a headline. They say, we're withholding grants from universities with DEI and who boycott Israel. So we're against DEI, except when it comes to Israel. In that case, we enforce DEI.
In which case,
policies.
we want DEI squared.
DEI squared, ZEI, Zionism,
ZEI.
Equity, and Inclusion.
Yep.
That's what we call it. I mean, just to package that in a headline. I mean, it's just, it's incredible. And this is why we said, being on the wrong side of Israel-Palestine has implications that you don't even realize. Realize. It's not just a foreign policy issue. It's an economic issue. It's obviously a civil liberties issue, which this is, as well as a health issue. I mean, you talk about the politicization of science. That's what we heard from these people all through the pandemic. Oh, you're politicizing science and weaponizing science for political gain. Well, what could be a more comical example of that than this? What could be a more egregious example of that than this? And they're happy to do it. They're happy to do it if Israel wants.
There was actually a story I was thinking about doing. There's a doctor who's here on a visa who is the only person is doing research into this new diagnostic method of diagnosing cancer that could save potentially millions of lives. and they can't continue her research because they won't let her in.
Wow.
I mean, this is, I cannot imagine, short of hitting the country with a nuke, I can't imagine a foreign enemy destroying this country as thoroughly as this administration is in the process of doing.
Yeah.
You're not going to feel the impact now. They've been there 3 months. When this starts to really play out, total collapse in tourism, and hey, man, that's billions of dollars into the economy. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. It matters. That's airlines. That's
Oh, yeah.
airlines being able to run, to continue to function.
100%.
You feel, I just saw my friend up here who I met actually because she was on one of my tours, and she was very nice. I told her I was thinking about coming up here. She gave me her number. And she said she's going down to New York City on the train. And she said she never did that before. I said, what do you mean? She said, I'm not getting on a plane. They're turning
Right.
upside down. They're lighting on fire.
Yeah.
So you want these airlines to have to cut more corners to stay in business? But when you look at this, you are going to overnight destroy
Oh, yeah.
the American university system, which attracts a lot of talent. And last I heard, the people on the right are the ones who are most comfortable with setting up new corporations and venture capitalism and Silicon Valley. They're the least likely to question that. So you don't have an issue with that basic concept of that being a generator of the country's wealth, right? So what do you think is going to happen when nobody wants to come here anymore? What's going to happen to these universities when you're not bringing the best and the brightest anymore? Not only is it going to destroy these universities, all those businesses that they have, places like Stanford, they have incubator labs specifically to cultivate these kinds of entrepreneurs and businesses. That's all going to dry up. It's all going to dry up. You are destroying the country. You are literally destroying the country. And I'm not saying it was working well before, but you know, there's an old Jewish folktale called "It Could Always Be Worse." This is we're very rapidly rushing headlong into what worse is going to look like. Like, talk to me in a year. Yeah, like it's 3 months in, man. You don't notice any difference, but you're going to.
Oh, 100%. Yes. No doubt about that whatsoever. All right, folks. Hey, before our final segment of the day, we want to take a quick pause to shout out our supporters. If you are a supporter, we will see you tonight, 8 p.m. for Movie Club. Duck Soup is the film club selection of the evening. You can go to I guess Jake redid that, but not all of that is right. So I'm gonna have to tell him. I don't know why he put the links on there, because yeah, those aren't all the correct links, but that's okay. Follow.
I'll
my
make
link.
them dead. You give me the order.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Follow the links I got you here. It's patreon.com.
What happened to my phone?
I mean, unless he made them. He may have made these links, so they might actually work. Let me try that. Does that actually work? DoDissidents.com/Patreon. Maybe he made them, and that's why. Oh, yeah, he did. All right, so never mind. Those do actually work. My apologies, Jake. Those are the correct links. He created them. So DoDissidents.com/Patreon, DoDissidents.com/Substack, or DoDissidents.com/Locals. Those are your options. DoDissidents.locals.com. You can join at the bright red join button underneath the video player if you are watching on Rumble right now. For $5 a month, you get your name up in lights here on the show scroll. You get call-in access to all of the post-show Q&As every Sunday night. You get 2 bonus live streams per month, a film club call-in live stream and a content and call-in live stream. You also get ad-free versions of the live stream, ad-free replays of the live stream emailed to you the day after they air. That is a convenient perk. People are loving that perk. So if you miss a stream, you don't have to sit through the ad breaks on the replay. You get an ad-free replay emailed right to your inbox. You also get live stream access to all of our pre-recorded full-length interviews. All that for just $5 a month. Tonight we'll be doing an interactive screening of Duck Soup, the 1933 Marx Brothers comedy. That should be a lot of fun with, ongoing commentary, analysis, supplemental materials, and, of course, your calls after it's done. So do dissidents.locals.com. It helps tremendously. You guys are the backbone of the show, so thank you all very much for your support. Okay, Sonny D. Beat, if there was a Finkelstein-Peterson debate, you think any dogs in the room would start to howl? Yeah, exactly. Someone else had the idea, Finkelstein and Peterson duet, I got you, babe. Yeah. Lay your little hand in mine. There's not any mountain we can't...
You're flat!
Yeah, you're flat! Horrible. Horrible. That's not even the first line of that song. I just always think of it as the first line of that song because that's what comes on the radio in the Groundhog Day movie. Like when he wakes up every day, it's on that line of that song. So I always think of that as the opener.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I hope Rogan has invested wisely, says Judy Denmark. I think he's in a downward spiral. I haven't kept track of his viewership. I assume it's about to drop like a rock. Yeah, they still do pretty good numbers.
They still do good numbers. I do agree that I think that when all of this really blows up in their faces, a lot of people who are perceived to have been cheerleaders are not going to do well.
Yeah, it's a big bag of shit to be holding at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not woke, I'm not anti-woke, but I am broke, but definitely but I identify as anti-broke. Thank you, Eric Cuso. Turtle Butler, if I could build a time machine with only one trip and had to choose between strangling baby Adolf and the person who coined the term woke. Thank you. Free shit, unless the word is populist, you got to know where that word came from. It's Vito P. We must stop pushing the dangerous narratives like end the massacre of children. Cancer sucks. Yes, you guys rock. Thank you, Vito P. Sorry, populist, not populist. That's right. Thank you, free shit. I love Greenwald, but in fairness to Constantine, he is considered to be a gifted satirist.
By who?
Yeah, by who? The white farmer stuff is so astroturf. Saw a heavy-duty country posting reactionist slop about that even before the election. Like, how could some backwater hick even learn about that organically? Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Oh, yeah, sure. But you should go and look at the comments of the segments we've done on this. You want to talk about people who are regarded and well regarded. You go read those comments.
Yeah, it is crazy. Rumblin' Thunder, Peterson's projection is classic. Darvo. Nina Can't. Dudes, I'm getting an IV drip of NAD 250 milligrams and vitamin slurry at my new doctor's office. Fuck insurance, direct primary care. Good luck, Nina.
You go.
Otacon, kind of niche, but you gamers Nexus did a brilliant 3-hour documentary showing how radically and fundamentally the tariffs would affect consumer electronics. That's why we call him Tech Jesus. Thank you very much.
You know what I like? I keep meaning to watch. They just did something kind of uncharacteristically on economics. Cold Fusion. That channel has a huge following. They usually do tech, but they just did something on billionaires, on why the billionaires keep getting richer and you don't. Like that's not their usual lane, but it's a very good channel.
Noah Goop, Scott Ritter. Do you know what happens to my stomach after a steakhouse meet and greet? Imagine your food slowly liquefying and falling out of you like a stillborn lamb. There you go. Thank you.
It's like a revolution in your ass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. $1 Million Trooper. When I use a word, Humpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. Lewis Carroll. Brandon Guillory, thanks for the $50. Appreciate that. Let's have cowbell, virtual
I can
cowbell.
do that. I can do that.
You got it there? Beautiful.
I'll find it. Yeah. All right. There it is.
There it is. Brandon Guillory says the individualization of systemic power dynamics is the basis of woke as victimhood. Well put. Well put. The issue is when the victims project onto individuals solely on that basis. Yes, very well put, Brandon. I'm going to put a heart on that one. Thank you very much for your generosity. Annie adds, thanks for the $5. Love your show, guys. Thank you for speaking up and speaking out for the basic rights of Americans and the moral issue of our lifetime. Appreciate that. Thank you for the encouragement. Alexis Hellwig says, it seems that the Chinese government is using all wisdom coming from Confucius, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, and Sigmund Freud, while the U.S. administration just watched a few episodes, of Game of Thrones. Yes, exactly. Yes, well put.
And not the good ones.
Not the good
seventh
ones.
season ones.
Yeah, exactly. Pete Sweet, Trump doesn't give two shites about the American worker. The tariffs were all to justify the tax cuts promised in the coming months. Yep. RBGH fam, you should only tariff critical goods, food, medicine, bullets, drones, etc. Politics is just the argument of those definitions. Thank you for that very much. All right, folks, final segment of the day coming at you right now.
Okay, so much winning around Tesla corporate offices. Ooh, ouch. Tesla reports 20% drop in auto revenue as first quarter results miss Wall Street estimates. And those estimates were not good either, and they missed the estimates. Tesla reported a miss on the top and bottom lines in its first quarter earnings report on Tuesday, as automotive revenue plunged 20% from a year earlier. Here are the key numbers compared with LSEG expectations. Earnings per share, 27 cents adjusted versus 39 cents estimated. Revenue, 19.34 billion versus 21.11. Total revenue slid 9% from 21.3 billion a year earlier. Automotive revenue dropped 20% to 14 billion from 17.4 last year. Operating income in the quarter slid 66% to 400 million from 1.17 billion a year earlier, resulting in a 2.1% operating margin. The company cited an increase in expenses tied to artificial intelligence projects as one factor in the decline. Now, hang on. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. So you know how Elon's been running around chasing phantom 250-year-olds who are getting Social Security and drumming up a lot of hysteria about all the waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. He said recently when he lowered his target for Doge to 150 billion. Well, you look in any direction in the government and you'll find waste, fraud, and abuse. He should look in a mirror. The company would have lost money on automotive sales without environmental regulatory credits during the quarter. Revenue from the credits, which Tesla receives for selling fully electric vehicles, increased to 595 million from 432 million in the same quarter last year. Okay, so 400 million, 595 million. So they would have taken $195 million loss if it were not for the government.
Right.
For the government, they would have taken a loss. They would have taken, well, they would have gone bankrupt a long time ago, as we will see. This is the guy who wants your grandma to have to drive to some rural place to prove that she exists when she applies for benefits. Net income plummeted 71% to 409 million, or 12 cents a share, from 1.39 billion or 41 cents a year ago. Tesla refrained from promising growth this year and said it will revisit our 2025 guidance in our quarter two update. Tesla shares are down 41% so far in 2025 and suffered their worst quarterly drop since 2022 in the period that ended in March. The stock was initially little changed in extended trading on Tuesday, but then popped almost 5% after President Trump said he has no plans to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Now, that was part of it. Part of it was also, remember, me and Keaton, we talked that day. We were actually on the air, and I saw the Tesla was up, and I said he promised some shit. Because with these kinds of numbers, and that's exactly, it's gonna be beautiful. Like when we were first married, there's gonna be robots, servants by 2029. There's gonna be the robo-taxi. We're gonna do it so much cheaper than Waymo that has an enormous head start in the market. So a lot of these analysts who have a lot of conflicts of interest to prop this stock up gave it an upgrade. The company would have lost money on automotive sales without environmental regulatory credit. Oh, okay. Whoops. Okay, so disability advocates sue Social Security Administration and Doge to stop service cuts. This is the same guy who would have lost money in his automotive section if he did not get money from the government. But it doesn't stop there. Elon Musk's business empire is built on $38 billion in government funding. This article came out about a month ago, just a little bit of that. Because we have this idea he's the real Tony Stark.
Right.
He's the self-made man who wrested wealth from the bare bones of the capitalist jungle. But not so much. Not so much. NASA and the Defense Department nurtured SpaceX in its earliest years with contracts that helped it build infrastructure, while the agency tolerated the company's failure to meet required milestones on time, according to congressional investigators. The $465 million Energy Department loan, which arrived in 2010, helped fuel Tesla's meteoric rise. With that money, the company engineered and assembled its luxury electric sedan, the Model S, and bought a factory in Fremont, California, according to the agency. Tesla went public 6 months later. Quote, Tesla would not have survived without the loan, said a former high-level Tesla employee familiar with the company's finances who spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution. It was a critical loan at a critical time. Okay, so remember, this is the same guy running around talking about how everybody in the federal government is a freeloader who wants to cut all of these programs that help regular average people who maybe need an opportunity, need a leg up, need some help from the government, need just basic Social Security. He's lying about there being a mass amount of fraud in Social Security. Certainly he has enough, although he does not have a background in engineering. He doesn't really have the skill set that people seem to think he does. He certainly understood that Social Security was using COBOL, and that's why you had all these people in the system. So why did he come out and tell you otherwise? He certainly knew better.
Right.
Because he was looking for a way to justify making it. He knew he can't cut Social Security. That would just be too unpopular. Make it very hard to get by putting in anti-fraud measures that are really not necessary, by claiming an emergency that does not exist. This same motherfucker got $38 billion at least. At least. That's public contracts and grants with the government. That doesn't even account for classified money that he might have gotten for classified programs. This is the guy who's telling you the grandma needs to take an Uber that you can't afford to prove that she exists. So here is the earnings report, which is really, I'm going to play his whole opening self-pitying monologue because it's really quite amazing, quite amazing. There is no reason that anyone would be protesting Tesla other than that he cut off their fraudulent funds.
As people know, there's been some blowback for the time that I've been spending in government with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. I think the work that we're doing there is actually very important for trying to rein in the insane deficit that is leading our country, the United States, to destruction. And the DOGE team has made a lot of progress in addressing waste and fraud. The natural blowback from that is those who were receiving the wasteful dollars and the fraudulent dollars will try to attack me and the DOGE team and anything associated with me. So then I'm really left with two choices. Should we just let the waste and fraud continue? We're continuing at it to grow at a really unsustainable pace that was bankrupting the country, or to fight the waste and fraud and try to get the country back on the right track. And I believe the right thing to do is to fight the waste and fraud and get the country back on the right track, and working together with President Trump and his administration. Because if the ship of America goes down, we all go down with it, including Tesla and everyone else. So I think this is this critical work. Now, the protests that you'll see out there, they're very organized. They're paid for. They're obviously not going to admit that the reason that they're protesting is because they're receiving fraudulent money, or that they're the recipients of wasteful largesse. But
Okay, well, we'll come back, but I just have to point out there are protests against him worldwide. Worldwide. They're getting money from the U.S. government. People in Australia, people in Europe, people all over the world. They're all getting government largesse. That's why they're protesting. It's just insane that he would go and say this in an earnings call. And you know what's more insane? These greedy analysts who didn't call him out on it, who said, oh, yeah, no, robots. Sounds good. Sounds good. We're turning a corner. He's leaving Washington. And he's not even leaving, although he physically left right after this earnings call. He says he's still going to work there 1 or 2 days a week. All right, so let's continue.
They're going to come up with some other reason. But that is the real reason for the protests. The actual reason is that those receiving the waste and fraud wish to continue receiving it. That is the real thing that's going on here, obviously. So now that said, I do think there's, the large slug of work necessary to get the Doge team in place and working in the government to get the financial house in order is mostly done. And I think starting probably in next month, May, my time allocation to Doge will drop significantly. I'll have to continue doing it for, I think, probably the remainder of the president's term, just to make sure that the waste and fraud that we stop does not come roaring back, which we'll do if it has the chance. So I think I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters, for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla. And now that the major work of establishing the Department of Government Efficiency is done. So at Tesla, we've gone through.
Okay. All right. So what are the fruits of this tremendous and important labor that not only has been, set the national budget back on course, but he still has to work 1 or 2 days a week in the government to make sure they don't reverse course. What has been the product of all this? Elon Musk drastically drops Doge savings goal from $2 trillion to $150 billion for the year. $150 billion. Put that in perspective. The richest 1% at the very top of the income cheat the U.S. government of roughly $175 billion per year in revenue, according to the findings by a team of economists from academia and the IRS. Doge projected savings of $150 billion is less than what should be paid by the tax cheats. So, we could have just not gone through any of this, and Elon and his criminal friends could have just paid their fucking taxes, and you wouldn't need Doge at all. Wouldn't need it at all. Hey, he's doing such a great job. Why did nearly $1 billion in Doge savings disappear overnight? In a late night update to its webpage, Doge removed hundreds of previously claimed cuts and altered scores of others to boost the item's claimed savings values. So originally, Doge was going to be radically transparent. And then when reporters started to examine their claims and find they were total, utter bullshit, they stopped being so transparent. First, they stopped listing the grant numbers and the invoice numbers. And then some reporters figured out it was still buried in the digital code. And then they started scrubbing that too. So now they just say stuff like right before he had that cabinet meeting with Trump. The savings on the website went from 140 to 150 billion. No explanation. Just needed to pad the numbers before the meeting. That's what he needs to still be involved in government to preserve. Now, he did say a little bit about tariffs, and he's kind of repeatedly, obviously being an interested party, spoken against the boss's policy here.
Are still, tough on a company when margins are still low. I just want to emphasize that the tariff decision is entirely up to the President of the United States. I will weigh in with my advice with the President, which he will listen to my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision. I've been on the record many times as saying that I believe lower tariffs are generally a good idea for prosperity. But this decision is fundamentally up to the elected representative of the people, being the President of the United States. So, I'll continue to advocate for lower tariffs rather than higher tariffs, but that's all I can do.
Okay, so as I said, a lot of this call was taken up with very typical Elon Musk, P.T. Barnum-esque promises, given Elon Musk's history of promising things like full self-driving cars by the end of 2019 that can go by themselves from California to New York. It's pretty amazing to see so many analysts take it seriously, particularly given that it's pretty obvious, this is kind of a theme of the show today, the failure of experts to see the obvious. It's very obvious that the Tesla brand has been irrevocably destroyed. Now, I can't speak to money that he's going to pick out of the government's pocket, the government that he doesn't want anybody else getting any money from, but he's very comfortable taking for himself. I can't speak to what he might be able to do to save himself with Defense Department contracts and that kind of thing. But as a consumer brand, Tesla is done. Tesla is over. You will never be able to recover the target consumer for an EV, which are libs. Conservatives still don't want it. they still do. Conservatives will sign up to X. Doesn't cost them anything. Yeah, they like the Elon brand. I mean, some conservatives like the Elon brand, not all, not to paint with a broad brush. But they're not in the market for an EV. And the libs are never coming back. And internationally, it seems like it's even worse with his interference in foreign politics and just being associated with this administration. Why, you think in China they're going to be buying Teslas now? BYD is, by all accounts, a much better car. That's another factor. Tesla has fallen behind its competitors, and the brand has become toxic. The idea of analysts like Tesla bull Dan Ives saying this is insane. Musk has handled the conference call very well. Recommit to Tesla and major step back on Doge. This was well communicated by Musk on this call in our view. Needed to hear this tone and direction as discussed on CNBC. That is about as good as Scott Bessent's call on how the China tariffs would play out. How anyone who is a professional economic analyst, financial analyst, could think that Tesla could recover from the complete destruction of its relationship to its core customer base, I do not know. But again, this is another one of those things, when you take a look at this in a year, 2 years, it's going to be very obvious that this company was never in a position to recover its customer base.
Well, and Doge is going to be done soon too. That was one of my predictions, which I already take credit for.
Remember, he fled Washington right after this call.
Yeah, well, remember when Vivek Ramaswamy was going to be part of Doge, and he quit before it got started. And apparently, Doge was supposed to end in 2026, but he just said in the call there, yeah, after this month, I'm going to be spending most of my time back at Tesla again. It did not stand up to public pressure. I mean, that was what a lot of the anger at a lot of the Republican town halls was about Doge. Right. Now they're getting it about the deportations, but at first it was about Doge.
Right.
And the Wisconsin result was really the nail in the coffin. I mean, that was a repudiation of Elon in not just a swing state, but a real sort of bellwether state. And so I think, Wisconsin has picked the president in every election going back to, I believe, 2004. I think I'm right about that. I think they have, so that's an important test right there that he failed miserably. And so, yeah, I mean, that's not a surprise. And it's not a surprise to me. Big picture, I had a feeling this experiment was not long for the world. The rapaciousness of it was just so out in the open that once the public got a chance to chime in on it, they made it pretty clear that they weren't down with it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think his brand is tanked. I think his car brand is obviously tanked. And I think Doge, when all is said and done, will be, looked upon as really one of the many design flaws of Trump term 2 was thinking that they could get people on board for that for so long. Don't forget, at first the Doge numbers were good. Oh yeah, we love it. We love that USAID is the fund, and then they got a sense of what they were really up to. And first chance people had to make their voices heard about it, they rejected it pretty handily.
Yeah, and if you listen to his opening monologue there, he sounds like he's in a panic because Tesla is the economic engine for everything else. Right. Tesla collapses. You know what he's got? Debt. He's got a lot of debt. He's got debt on his businesses. He can't borrow against that stock anymore to enjoy his billionaire lifestyle tax-free the way all of these criminals do.
Exactly. Otacon says, dang it, Keaton, not H-I-C, hick, because he's a drunk. Get it? I'll see myself out. Okay, thank you, Otacon. Appreciate that. $1 Million Trooper, we have a woke-off, gentlemen. We have a woke-off. Thank you. Noah Goop, got you, Keaton. My question was, do you guys know Jamal Thomas? He went on Canadian Prepper for an interview, and it was pretty good. I recommend checking it out. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I do know of him. Yeah, I used to watch him back in the day. Like, he had a channel back in, 2016. So, yeah, he's good. For sure. Very good point, Russell. A lot of tech reviewers are slowly becoming geopolitical analysts because there's no point reviewing tech if no one can buy it due to tariffs. Yeah, there you go. It's like a revolution in your ass. New T-shirt, Russell. There you go. Noah says Elon might not understand COBOL, but you know who does? The 4-year-old working in his mines. Ayo, there you go. Noah Goop. Before Ritter came on, I was under the impression argon liquefier was an item sold at Rabbi Shmuley at koshersex.com. Apparently, Rabbi Shmuley ghosted Max Blumenthal today. He was supposed to debate him somewhere, and he didn't show up.
Oh, really?
Apparently, he did not show up.
Now, that would have been one for the ages. That does not surprise me, though.
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. I vote the fooled man quote from Bush for the intro. There you go. That's a good one. Thank you, Charles. FU over on YouTube says expose CUFI, the largest pro-Israel organization in the United States with over 10 million members, Christians United for Israel. The UK also has members as well. Thank you, FU. Brad Gilbert says Musk's AI project is bureau bots built for him. Thank you very much for that, Brad Gilbert, and thank you all very much for being here. That is our show. If you'd like to join us later for the film club, you can do so by going to dudissidents.locals.com, and we will be live at 8 p.m. You guys will be getting the emails after the show. We can only schedule one Rumble stream at a time, so that's why you haven't gotten the invitations, but you should be getting those within the next couple hours, and then we will see you, of course, 8 o'clock tonight for the film club. So sign up if you aren't signed up, dudissidents.locals.com. Thanks to everybody for being here, the YouTubers, the Rumblers. Thanks to our mods, as always, for keeping the peace in the chat. Appreciate you all very much, and we will see you all tonight if you're in the Cool Kids Club, if you're a member. If not, we will see you back here Sunday. That'll be April 27th for our regularly scheduled flagship broadcast, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, thanks very much for being here this afternoon, everybody. Be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.